Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Oldham County Fiscal Court. I'm David Vogel, Judge Executive. We're very happy to have you here today on this, our first August meeting on 6th of August, 2019. If you have a cell phone with you, I ask you to turn it to off or vibrate. And now I'd like to ask everyone who's able to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Magistrate Likens.
Here.
Magistrate Tice.
Here.
Magistrate Harrison. Here. Magistrate Greenwell.
Here.
Magistrate Hounds.
Here.
Magistrate Hawkins. Here. Magistrate Dye.
Here.
Magistrate Logsdon.
Here.
Judge Vogel.
Here. Having all members of the Fiscal Court present, this meeting is now in session. The motion to accept the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Judge,
Are there any corrections or additions?
Judge, we'd like to add under, I guess, J, under contracts and agreements and resolutions, the contract between the Fiscal Court and the Police Department for the SROs.
You mean above J and between I and J?
I'm sorry, between I and J, yeah.
All right, we'll do that. Magistrate Likens.
Thank you, Judge. I would like to pull from the agenda item J1, the bid award for the maintenance building metal sheathing project.
All right. Are there any other additions or deletions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Now, our custom here is to have our clerk read the minutes from our last meeting. That meeting occurred on July 16th.
July 16th, 2019. The Oldham County Fiscal Court convened at a regular meeting at 2:05 p.m. with Judge Executive David Vogel, County Attorney John Carter, and the following magistrates in attendance: Brent Likens, Wayne Tice, Albert Harrison, Steve Greenwell, Chris Hounds, Stephanie Hawkins, Bob Dye, and Michael Logsdon. Motion made by Magistrate Greenwell, seconded by Magistrate Dye to approve the agenda, removing two items: first reading of proposed changes to 911 services fee ordinance and the bid award for the maintenance building sheathing project. Motion carried unanimously. Motion made by Magistrate Dye, seconded by Magistrate Hounds to approve the meeting minutes from June 28th. Motion carried unanimously. Public comment. Karen Greenwell with City Place Expo Center announced its Summer Family Fun Fest Saturday, July 27th from 10 to 2, family-friendly activities, food truck, craft and vendor fair, free admission and open to the public. Louisville Orchestra will offer a free concert at the City Place Pavilion Friday, September 6th. Judge Vogel shared information on the increased police patrol and speed limit enforcement on I-71 in Oldham County in efforts to deter speeding and reckless driving along I-71 corridor. LaGrange Fire Protection District Budget and Tax Rate Presentation. LaGrange Fire Chief Jim Sitzler and J.D. Tice presented information relating to its ad valorem tax rate and fiscal year 20 budget and responded to questions from the court. Extension District Budget and Tax Rate Presentation. Extension District Board Chairman David Dybel and Attorney John Solomon presented information relating to its ad valorem tax rate and fiscal year 20 budget and responded to questions from the court. Oldham County Stormwater District. Stormwater Board Chairman William Douglas and County Engineer MS4 Coordinator Jim Silliman presented information relating to its fiscal year 20 budget and responded to questions from the court. Oldham LaGrange Development Authority Board. David Bazanas presented information relating to its fiscal year budget and responded to questions from the court. Oldham County Chamber and Economic Development. Chamber and Economic Development President David Bazanas presented information relating to its fiscal year 20 budget and responded to questions from the court. Motion made by Magistrate Dye, seconded by Magistrate Greenwell to take a 10-minute recess. Motion carried unanimously. Motion made by Magistrate Dye, seconded by Magistrate Greenwell to reconvene the meeting. Motion carried unanimously. Payables. Motion made by Magistrate Hounds and seconded by Magistrate Logsdon to approve the payables. Motion carried unanimously. Community business. First reading, proposed changes to comprehensive plan. Planning and Zoning Director Jim Urban presented for first reading proposed ordinance number 19-920-549 relating to changes and updates to the comprehensive zoning ordinance. The second reading public hearing will be August 6th. Contract agreements and resolutions. JAVS maintenance and service agreement for the courtroom equipment. Motion made by Magistrate Hounds and seconded by Magistrate Logsdon to authorize the judge executive to sign the equipment maintenance and service agreement with JAVS relating to fiscal courtroom audiovisual recording equipment. Motion carried unanimously. Spay Neuter Program 2019 grant application. Motion made by Magistrate Harrison and seconded by Magistrate Greenwell to authorize the judge executive to sign the grant application relating to the 2019 Spay Neuter Program. Motion carried unanimously. Deceased Farm Animal Removal Program grant. Motion made by Magistrate Greenwell, seconded by Magistrate Hounds, to authorize the judge executive to sign the grant application relating to the Deceased Farm Animal Removal Program. Motion carried unanimously. Personnel actions. Police. Motion made by Magistrate Greenwell, seconded by Magistrate Logsdon to hire Mason Klein and Parker Thomas as police recruits at $17.21 base hourly rate effective August 12th. Motion carried unanimously. Public comment, none. Announcements. Magistrate Harrison commended the state highway contract mowers, announced a ribbon cutting for the Highway 524 bridge, 9 a.m. Wednesday, July 31st. Military observance days, July 29th, Army Chaplain Corps birthday, August 1st, Air Force Day, August 4th, Coast Guard Day. Magistrate Greenwell announced Saturday, July 20th is Oldham County Day. Full day of events around the courthouse and downtown LaGrange. Magistrate Hounds provided a status update on Ash Avenue project. Anticipated completion date of August 1st. Oldham County EMS received 3-year national reaccreditation through CASS, along with recognition for outstanding quality in pediatric care and care for its patients suffering from severe heart attacks. Magistrate Dye announced car break-ins are still being reported and that doors should be kept locked with valuables out of sight. Magistrate Logsdon announced Pee Wee Valley received $105,600 from TAP for the installation of sidewalks from Elm to Old Floydsburg Road. Judge Vogel announced Brad Rogers, longtime band director at Oldham County High School, is the Grand Marshal for the Oldham County Day Parade, and a luncheon was held today in his honor. Motion made by Magistrate Dye and seconded by Magistrate Greenwell to adjourn the meeting. Motion carried unanimously. The meeting was adjourned at 4:50 p.m.
You've heard the reading of our minutes from the July 16th meeting. Are there any corrections? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Now we have some guests here today that we'd like to introduce and recognize, and I'm going to call on Magistrate Harrison for that.
Thank you, Judge. Tomorrow, August 7th, is National Purple Heart Day in the United States of America. And as you know, for every meeting, I've been announcing Military Day observances coming up, and I thought it only appropriate to announce, but also to have people here who proudly wear the Purple Heart and received it in combat over the years. A little history real quickly. George Washington instituted the Medal of Merit, as he called it at that time, which is now the Purple Heart, and it was to recognize people in the Revolutionary War who had been wounded or died in combat. After the Revolutionary War, it pretty much disappeared. And then in World War II, General MacArthur recognized that the troops supporting us in Europe, or the ones we were supporting, had all kinds of medals and ribbons, so he started coming up with things for our military to have. And the first medal he looked at was the Purple Heart medal and brought it back. And the original criteria was somebody in uniform who shed blood for this country or died. It's gone through numerous revisions since then, and today it also includes the military returning from the Middle East or suffering from traumatic brain injury and PTSD. So you don't have to be shot, you don't have to be in a hospital. They've dropped the requirement of being seen by a doctor because it can be awarded after they get back to the States and they're diagnosed with those ailments. So it's with a lot of pride, and it's my privilege to introduce to the group, two very distinguished people from here in Oldham County. The first one, Harold Roberts. Harold, stand up, please. He's a recipient of the Purple Heart for action in Korea, and he also served in Vietnam. And next to him is our living legend, Howard Griffin, who has received 3 Purple Hearts, one each for actions in World War II, Korea, and in Vietnam. So, and I'd like each one of them just to say where they were, what happened when they received that Purple Heart. This is Harold Roberts.
Well, I was a radio operator for the battalion commander, and there were 5 of us in a little area there. We were on the main line against North Korea. And a mortar came in right in the middle of all of us. It killed all 4 of the others. I was digging a hole for the battalion commander and was down at that time and lost hearing in one ear. I eventually got it back, but there's some small shrapnel here and there, which I still have one piece.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sergeant Griffin?
Art Griffin. I went to North Africa in 1943. From there I went to France and then in Italy. Just north of Naples, Italy, I couldn't keep my head down. Got my head busted open, put a plate in it. Well, I went through the rest of it. They didn't send me home. They liked me. Rest of the war there. The war ended in Europe. Put on a ship with 1,200 other people, 2 ships out of Leghorn, Italy. And I was in Japan when the war ended there. Got out of the Army in 1946. In 1948, they didn't forget me. They called me back. Well, in Korea, a shell had my head up. The plate they put in my head in Naples, Italy, Korea, they got knocked out. But my skull had grown back together. I stayed in that time, and I went to Vietnam. I got hit in Vietnam again, my left leg. Very fortunate, very grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Howard.
Can I just mention one other thing?
Yes, sir.
One of the things that I said after that happened, I said, God, just get me out of here alive, and I'll serve you forever. I eventually became a Navy chaplain.
Thank you.
My story is short. January 1968, I was in South Vietnam on a patrol, standing still, and they had a command detonated landmine that blew me up and tried to take my legs away, but it didn't work. So the oddity about the uniqueness of the Purple Heart, it is the only medal that does not have any special requirements to it. There's no element of valor, there's no element of bravery. One does not have to be recommended by a higher ranking person to receive it. It's an automatic. If you're injured and you're in a combat zone, it's automatic, you get it. And it's one that none of us wants to have, but everybody who's ever received it, I believe, is very proud of it, including the family members, which would include Jerry Nort's son, Alex, who received a Purple Heart for his action in Iraq. And I wish we could fill the room with people here in Oldham County who have received the Purple Heart, but we don't know where they are. But hopefully, maybe this time next year, more of them will come together and we'll be able to introduce the entire group. So,
Judge, I'd like for anybody that's in the room that's been in the service to please stand up, and I'd like to give you a round of applause.
can't hear you.
I would like anyone else who has served to please stand up so we can give you a round of applause you deserve.
I'd like to ask, on top of that, I'd like everybody here in the room to stand up and thank our Purple Hearts for their service. We thank you all for being here today and appreciate your service and the service of all Purple Hearts, and obviously the service of everybody who has been in military service, some of whom have survived, some of whom have not. So freedom is not free. It comes with a tremendous risk, and we all know how it goes. Now, at this time, we have our public comment section. Was there anybody here who came to address the fiscal court on some item? We're able to do so. County Clerk Julie Barr is here today.
Good afternoon, Judge, Magistrates. We just completed our audit for 2018, and earlier in the year, in March, I handed over a check for my excess fees. It's my privilege to return the balance, which is relatively small, but it still counts. In Julie Barr world, this is a lot of shoes and purses, so that's how I look at everything. So I'm going to give the court $862.18. Total excess fees for 2018 was $379,798. Total since I took office in 2007, $4,026,347. And while I have the, I promised Chris Hounds I wouldn't talk, I'd take questions, I wouldn't prolong it, but I just want to remind anybody that's watching this channel that if you need to obtain your passport, please come to the Oldham County Clerk's office. We do passports daily until 3 o'clock. On Tuesday morning, of course, our office opens at 7 o'clock, and this is only in the LaGrange office. We are a full passport facility. We take your photos, and even if you need a photo for a professional license, we can do that. It's not strictly for passports, but those fees do stay here in the county, and last year, I think our passport fees totaled close to $50,000 in that neighborhood. So it does make a difference, and we are actually really busy with passports. No appointment required, just have to be done by 3 o'clock because we have regulations with the post office and passport facility to get that to the post office by a certain time.
All right, thank you. We'll accept the $882, is that right?
Already took my glasses off. 862.
All right. I won't speculate on shoes, but I know that's about 3 purses for you, isn't it? Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else who would like to address the fiscal court? Seeing no one, I'll close public comment and go on to the first item on our agenda today is our annual report from the North Oldham Fire Department. A special purpose government entity in Oldham County. Here representing North Oldham today is Board Chairman Randy Shearer and Chief Hewitt Brown.
Thank you. First thing I want to do is just introduce Hewitt Brown. He is our new chief since the last time I came last year. Hewitt's been with North Oldham for over 15 years. Quite an extraordinary firefighter, goes around the world, consulting with fire departments, mountain rescue, Africa, all over the place, Bahamas. And then recently, I got a kick out of this one. He was working on a project with NASA out in Colorado to consider training for Martian astronauts on emergency response stuff. So Hewitt, we're very proud and very happy to have Hewitt as our new chief, started last October. In general, just I think you have in your packet just some statistics about the North Oldham Fire District. We did have 541 runs last year. That's about a 4.8% increase from the year before, fairly consistently going up at about those rates, 5%, 4-5% a year for the last several years. We do have a total of 62 members. Most of those, we are staffed with full-time firefighters in 2 houses, and then we have 3 other full-time firefighters. That would be the chief, the deputy chief, and the training officer that are also paid firefighters on staff. So we have just about 1,000 hours per week of paid staff. That's 24/7 coverage with 5 to 8 people, depending on the time of day. Other kind of just highlights from last year, we did receive our ISO rating. Last time we were certified at ISO was 2012, so it had been a while. We did have an improvement in there, going down from a 4 down to a 3. Also in our, and they've changed some of the rating systems, but where we have a slightly lower rating out in some of our rural areas, and that's due to the fact that we have challenges with water. Once you get out past about Buckeye Lane, you see less hydrants and things along those lines, and that's why the lower rating in some of the more rural districts. Some things we're proud of is we have on there kind of our turnout times. We've changed the way we do these. We think are much more accurate than what we've done in the past. These are when the truck actually leaves and when the truck actually arrives. In the past, we, and I know others still might do this, but it was more when somebody responded to the call as opposed to when they were there and being able to do something about that. So we're pretty proud of those times, particularly when you figure it's probably a 25-minute drive from one end of our district to the other. So we've got a lot of ground to cover there. A few other things I just want to bring to light in terms of equipment. We are continually upgrading our equipment. We sold one of our larger fire trucks last year, and we are replacing that with a smaller mini pumper that will be stationed out at Skylight, much more better suited for the type of environment that we have out there, be able to get into fields, get into access where larger trucks just in some of our smaller county roads, less appropriate. We're also in the process of selling our boat, and we'll be replacing that with more of a Zodiac type boat. We think that's a little better suited for the type of activity that we do than our current situation there. Another thing, just want to point out, last year, about this time, there's a fairly large structure fire in our district. You may recall it was about a 16,000 square foot home, a fairly large home. 50 plus firefighters went to battle that blaze. I think we had 6 districts responding. One of the reasons I bring that up, though, I think that's important for fiscal court to understand is that, we are having more of these type of structures in the county. And what that means, or what that means to fiscal court and for the firefighting, is that one of the problems we had with that structure is it was built to residential standards, as opposed to, for residential standards, when you think of a 16,000 square foot structure, that fire spread much quicker than you could argue it should have if it was built to higher, more commercial codes, things like firewalls in there. It was a lightning strike, and that because of the lack of firewalls, that structure, that spread quickly. Why I bring this up, we're seeing more of that type of thing in our district. That might be something that you might want to consider as we look at fire regulations and things in the future. We continue to have a emphasis on outreach in our district. One of the things that we do is we do free CPR training for our district there. We had about 100 people certified in CPR last year through our program there. Financially, very good shape. We're continue to pay down debt. Got a little less than $2 million of debt, which is primarily bonds related to our firehouse. We would like to pay that down sooner if we could, but because of the structure of the bonds, we don't have an opportunity to do that until I think it's 2023. When we sold one of our buildings, we allocated another $250,000 for the purposes of paying down that debt. So we are, feel like we are in good shape financially. Our tax rate is at 9 cents per hundred. We've been there for probably 3 years or so. We've been at that rate. And so that's overview of North Oldham Fire District. And
Right. Does anyone have any questions? Measure Likens.
I just have one comment that back when we lowered our tax rate from 10 to 9.5 to 9, we got a lot of dissension between some of the other fire districts that I'm not picking on any individual one, but they have the tax and I'll figure out a way to spend it attitude. And I just want to applaud your efforts. You lowered the taxes and oh my God, we did not go broke. You still have a surplus. And I would like some of the other taxing districts in the state to follow your example and figure out how to get by on what they have and not just spend it because they have it. Just wanted to commend you on your excellent record.
Thank you. We appreciate your support you've given us over the years.
Anyone else have anything? All right, thank you, gentlemen, very
you.
much. Appreciate the good work that North Oldham Fire is doing. The next special government presentation today is from the South Oldham Fire Department, and here representing South Oldham is Chief Eddie Turner.
Good afternoon, Judge, members of Fiscal Court. South Oldham is doing pretty good down there. Our budget this year was $1.8 million. Tax rate is 9 cents per hundred. Been that way for several years, just like North Oldham. And the vehicle is 10 cents. This money would be used for the operation of the fire department, salaries, benefits, and maintenance of the fire stations and trucks. So, say we're doing pretty good. We had over 1,000 runs last year. Got 30 volunteers, so everything's running kind of smooth. So.
And you do operate with paid staff as well, correct?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
How many paid people do you have, Chief?
15.
15
and
paid?
5 or 6 part-time people.
Okay, and then 30 volunteers, you
Yeah.
say? All right. Have you been able to get as many volunteers as you'd like to have?
You can't get, volunteers are hard to come by.
Uh-huh.
Too much time, takes too much time for them, and they got families and kids, so.
I mean, how many, most of you said how many responses did you have last year?
1,012.
Okay, most of these are going to be accident-related or
Accidents or EMS first responder runs.
first responder runs. I know you're out on the interstate every time we have something out there that involves an accident or a fire. I don't think we've had as many fires on the interstate this year as we had the prior year. I haven't seen the trucks as on fire like I did for a while, but how long would you say it takes you to get out there?
Interstate, depending on where it is. If it's northbound side, we have to go all the way down to Jefferson County, cross over, come back, 4 or 5 minutes or so from the station. Not too long.
You also have a station in Brownsboro,
Right.
correct?
That's volunteers.
Volunteers there. Do you keep equipment there, I guess?
Yeah, 2
Okay.
fire engines in there.
Two engines there, all right. And do you have any other locations besides Crestwood and Brownsboro?
Yeah, that's the only ones we got.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Manager Likens?
Again, I would like to commend Eddie. I can call him that because we went to high school together and played football. But I just want to commend you on holding the rate of your tax rate. You're also at 9 cents, and you could be at 10. And there's a lot of chiefs out there, people that run committees that just take the maximum they can get. And I just want to commend you on holding your line at 9 cents.
I appreciate it. It's getting harder now. Of course, y'all know with the pension stuff, we're in the pension system, so that takes a big chunk out of our budget too, so but we'll manage.
And anybody else have anything they'd like to ask, Chief? Okay, well, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, sir.
Next presentation is from Westport Fire District, Chief David Pendleton.
Good afternoon. Correction, sir, I'm Assistant Chief.
Assistant Chief, you used to be Chief, right?
Yes, sir, I was Chief. As you can see in your packets, we're averaging, our income is $94,000 a year. That includes our state incentive pay, which is $11,500 for associating to the Fire Commission with their trainings. We're averaging anywhere from 65 to 85 runs a year. Unfortunately, fortunately, we're not that busy. About 70% of those are EMS assist runs because of the distance and the time frame it takes to go through some of those back roads. 2 or 5 runs a year, usually on the river. We respond out there. A lot of them used to call us AAA on the river, but it's one of those things where we go if they're in the shipping lanes, and it's safety's first. So some of them know what to say. We have 14 volunteers and no paid staff. And my guys and ladies do not take any reimbursement, only because they know that we're so short on funds. Westport is not a booming area. Our tax increase is, or our tax rate has stayed the same for years. It's been at 10%, and it's just not increasing much at all. So, but I would like to take this time to thank Albert Harrison. He's been answering a lot of calls from the residents. They expressed their thank you for that, and Wes with the road department coming out and helping with things. And of course, my ace in the hole is always Sheila, for reminding me of things that we need to be getting done, because again, most of our folks are at work. I'm pretty much the only one available during the day. That's why we're on automatic mutual aid with LaGrange, and then North, second out. So we do what we can with what we've got. And if you have any questions, feel free to answer.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Assistant Chief Pendleton?
All volunteer.
Yes, sir. All volunteer.
You and one other, only all volunteer departments left in Oldham County.
That's correct.
That's a statement. I mean, it's difficult being a volunteer. I can tell you, it's very difficult to do that, to do this job as a volunteer. And your guys should be commended for that.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate
you.
it. Now we're going to go to some bid openings here. I believe our treasurer will have paperwork from a number of different vendors here. I know. Somebody get their box cutter out here, or a knife. Guess we don't need a box cutter for this. All right, looks like a lot of pieces of paper to go through there. We have some road resurfacing and then vehicle papers here. First thing we're going to do is, this has to do with Group 5 in LaGrange here. City of LaGrange, I believe. Is that, Steve, is that what we have? Yeager Avenue, Clifford Lane, and Sunset Drive. First bid, Hall Contracting, $76,737.79. The next bid is from Libs Paving, Floyd Knob, Indiana, $62,166.15. Third bid is Louisville Paving, $64,969.10. Mack Construction, $70,537.88. Riverside Paving, $77,034.79. Wingham Paving, $73,538.14. And that's the first group. The next group here will be Cherry Hill Lane, Cherry Road, and is it just one circumstance on that? Called Group 4 here in Pee Wee Valley, $23,337 $23,336.70. $23,337.70. That's Libs Paving. Louisville Paving, $52,701.90. Mack Construction, $35,738.40. Riverside Paving, $29,619. Wingham Paving, $33,112.44.
First one again, 23,337?
Yes.
Yes, $23,337.70. Now we'll be on to Group 3. And Group 3 includes Dover Road and Foley Avenue, Schrader Lane, Pollock Avenue, Sadler's Mill, Cedar Point Lane, Old Cedar Point Road, Country Club Lane, High Point Drive, Croft Circle Drive, Palmer Park, McKendree Lane, Tarrant Lane, Renata Drive, Holly Gibson, Button Lane, Pierce Road, Largo, Commerce Parkway, Jen Jones Drive, Spear Lane, and Elder Park Cutoff. I believe I got them all there for Group 3. All right, bid's going to be a lot bigger on this group. First bid from Libs, $986,822.69. Louisville Paving and Construction, $867,691.42. Mack Construction, $1,013,325.83. No bid from Riverside on this. Wingham Paving, $1,007,713.38. $1,007,713.38. Guess we're on to Group 2 now. I'm not going to read all these. Libs Paving, $20,585.65. Louisville Paving, $45,803.51. Mack Construction, $32,601.30. Riverside Paving and Contracting, $25,949. No cents. Wingham Paving, $29,969.98. All right, down to our last group here. Okay. Group 1. Hall Contracting, $321,650.67. Libs Paving, $301,000. Let me repeat that. Did I say 321,650 and 67? I didn't think it. Pardon? That was the first one. Did I say it right? Okay. Pardon? Yeah. All right. Now we're at Libs, $301,502.29. Louisville Paving, $324,412.59. Mack Construction, $326,136.84. Riverside Paving, $418,036.48. Wingham Paving, $306,650.78. And those are the bids for the paving. All right, I'm going to ask our treasurer, Melissa Horn, to retrieve those bids. We'll have our county engineer look them over for specifications. And, right. Yes, sir.
Just wanted to thank all the vendors that came out and gave us a bid today.
Yes. We do thank you. Now we'll do the 2019 Dodge Durango. There's three of them, Kevin. Says three vehicles here. All right. So this is not one vehicle, it's three, so that's why it's going to seem high. $145,200. All right. John Jones Police Pursuit. The next one is a 2019 Dodge Durango. These were silver. This is gray, one vehicle. $40,500. John Jones Police Pursuit. Final vehicles, a 2018 Chevy Suburban. Champion Chevrolet, $40,500. Okay, thank you. Magistrate Likens.
Judge, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the bids of 6, 7, and 8, providing they conform with the Uniform Procurement Code and the state bid contract.
Just 6, 7, and 8 are all bids? All bids or just 6, 7, and 8?
Just 6, 7, and 8 for
Okay.
what we're bidding, right?
No, we had 1 through 8. Okay.
Well, the others are the.
Oh,
The
the
others
others
are
are- okay.
asphalt.
All right.
So,
My
just
mistake.
the- I'm talking about the
All right,
vehicles.
is there a second? All right. Any discussion?
We were just making a motion to accept these into the record.
No, I think we're making a motion to accept these bids if they meet the specs.
Just on
Cars.
the vehicles.
Yeah,
Just on the vehicles. The 6, 7, and 8, number 6, 7,
right,
and
the
8.
other, right, they'll be back. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And they'll be back with those others in a minute. Now we'll go on to the next item on the agenda, the payables. Is there when you're ready, we'll pay the bills.
Judge, I make a motion, we pay the bills.
Second, all right. Any discussion on any items showing up on the bills for the last 2 weeks here? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll go on to the first reading of the revisions to the Code Enforcement Board ordinance, and we have Jim Urban and possibly supplemented by Darrell Townsend here, or assisted.
Well, actually, I'm going to call on Chris Hounds, who's the chair of the Public Safety Committee. We had a meeting with the Public Safety Committee this morning, and it is the first reading of revisions to the Code Enforcement Board ordinance. And typically, we don't have a lot of comment. We're going to just, I guess, take the recommendation of the committee.
All right. Magistrate Hounds?
Judge, this was brought to the Public Safety Committee today, and it did come out of committee to have the first reading today to repeal and replace, let's see, what was the old ordinances, KOC. I don't think they can hear you, Chris. Okay, how about now? Repeal and replace ordinance KOC 02-15455 with KOC 19-150-01.
All right. This is the first reading. Would you like to just, we'll ask Mr. Urban to summarize the changes in this
Sure.
new ordinance to replace the existing ordinance?
Yes. Part of this revision is to come in compliance with the state's ordinance or laws regarding creation of code enforcement board and procedures. A lot of it isn't really changing. We worked with Matt Hudson, who's Assistant County Attorney, who's also been assigned to counsel the Code Enforcement Board, and he's gone through most of this with our staff. The most important change is to Section 9 on enforcement procedures. And Part B, we're recommending that the ordinance be changed to authorize the issuance of a citation, and that this is what the state statute says. If there's a violation, that you issue a citation, and in lieu of doing that, you can issue a notice of violation. Our ordinance actually says that we should do a notice of violation first. And by making this change, it would allow our staff to be able to do enforcement on more egregious offenses right to a citation. And so that's one of the biggest changes. Along with that, on Section D in that same, Part D in that same section, we're changing the time of response after issuance of a citation to 14 days, because sometimes it takes a few days just to get in the mail, and we had 7 days originally. So that just makes it a little easier to get a response from whoever's getting the citation. And then we're striking a portion that talks about violators that do not contest the citation within the time prescribed. The board shall enter a final order. We just don't see that that's necessary to have that, and a copy of the final order served upon the violator. And then we're going to propose in the second reading, separate from this ordinance, a fine schedule. And we're going to work with the Public Safety Committee to refine that fine schedule, and we'll have it for you ready at the second reading.
All right, this is the first reading. This proposed replacement will be put on our website. Everybody will have a chance to read it. We'll bring it up again in a month. Sorry. This is the replacement for the ordinance, and we'll put it on our website. Everybody have a chance to read it, and we'll bring it up in the first meeting in September. Magistrate Dye.
Just want to note, just more of a typographical thing. On the cover sheet on this, it says it was stricken out an ordinance creating a code enforcement board, ordinance revisions. That's not even close to what the back of it is. It's actually an ordinance repealing and replacing this ordinance. So if someone was to look for this, they wouldn't find it underneath there from that cover page information.
Cover page is the one that was signed by the Matt Hudson.
Yeah.
Right,
But
so what
normally-
we'll do is put the title of the actual ordinance
It
in.
should be, that's what it should be up here on the
Yes.
front.
Thank
One's
you.
replacing the other. Just one, someone was looking for this, and they would see that, they wouldn't know that this was what they were looking for.
Right.
So just a typographical thing.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Judge?
Yes, sir.
Jim, what did you say that you're going to talk with the public safety maybe about the fine section of it
That's correct.
and get that more?
There were some comments during the Public Safety Committee meeting this afternoon, or before this meeting, regarding some of the fines that were proposed, and those won't be part of the ordinance. That's a separate, usually we do these outside of the ordinance, so they could be updated without changing the ordinance itself. So we're going to work with the Public Safety Committee to take their comments into consideration and potentially change the fine schedule.
But we won't be voting on the fines in the first meeting in September.
You will after the ordinance.
Okay.
Correct. It'll be by resolution. Yeah,
Okay.
2 separate decisions, yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item we're going to take up here today has to do with the approving KOC 19-209549. These are changes and updates to the comprehensive zoning ordinance. And whereas Oldham County Fiscal Court has the authority to pursuant to the provisions of KRS Chapter 67-100 and other applicable law to adopt and amend ordinances. And whereas Oldham County Joint Planning and Zoning Commission did conduct an advertised public hearing on May 28, 2019 on the issue of amending certain sections of the Oldham County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to include the attached revisions, at the conclusion of said hearing did recommend to the fiscal court that certain sections of the comprehensive zoning ordinance be amended to include the revisions. And whereas Oldham County Fiscal Court did advertise and conduct a public hearing on the recommended comprehensive zoning ordinance changes attached here too, and that said fiscal court having voted to adopt said revisions to the sections at its regular meeting on August 6th, 2019. Now that's anticipated there. So we're going to have a hearing now, and this is a second reading, so there are many revisions to this, some of which may be of interest to individuals here today. Others may have no interest found in them to anybody here today. So we're going to give everybody a chance to speak who would like to speak in favor of this, or anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to any section will have an opportunity to speak. So this being a somewhat large piece of material to negotiate through, I think the first thing I'd like to do is ask our planning director, Jim Urban, to provide a summary, if he will, of the proposed changes.
Sure. Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, magistrates. My name is Jim Urban. I'm the Director of the Planning and Development Services for the county. With me this afternoon is Amy Alvey. She's Assistant Director. Tom McIntyre was involved in this, some of these discussions. He's down watching the store downstairs. Also in the audience is Kevin Jeffries, who's the Chair of the Planning Commission, Greg King, who's the Vice Chair, and long-term members, both of them, of the Planning Commission. And we're also, Kevin is the Chair of the Study Review Committee, and Greg King is the Vice Chair of the Study Review Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Planning Commission, who is charged basically with looking at any revisions to the ordinances, subdivision regulations, or the comprehensive plan, and managing, if you will, a public process where we have open public meetings and public discussions. As staff, we bring recommendations to the SRC. They discuss them, take public comment, and we've been doing this particular section of the revisions to the zoning ordinance for about 18 months. This is our third batch of subject matter on the zoning ordinances that we're bringing forward to fiscal court for your consideration. The easiest way for us to manage this was to take it in particular sections and revise them as we went along and bring those sections forward. So we're looking forward to the opportunity to present this information to you today and certainly answer any questions. The rest of the study review committee included Bob Klingenfuss, Mary Ann Smith, Ed Halfling, all members of the Planning Commission. So after the study review committee heard the information, they then did pass it on to the Planning Commission, and we've had meetings of the SRC going back to January of 2018, which is when we did the last round of revisions to the zoning ordinance. We had a public meeting on April 25th at the John Black Center in Buckner, and it was attended by about 30 members of the public as well as some elected officials. And then the Planning Commission heard this from the recommendation from the Study Review Committee on the 28th of May, sorry, skipped a month. So the timeline again was since the beginning of 2018 all the way to the 28th of May. We've had 8 SRC meetings, we've had a public meeting, we've had a comment period of a couple of weeks, and so these recommendations were unanimously forwarded by the Planning Commission to the legislative bodies for your review and hopeful adoption. Just a brief background, we have a couple of documents so that we're not confusing terminology. This is not the comprehensive plan, this is the comprehensive zoning ordinance. The comprehensive plan is a long-range look at the future of Oldham County, and we actually have to start updating that this year, which we're already working on. The comprehensive zoning ordinance is basically the zoning classifications, the permitted uses, the conditional uses, and the particulars of doing a development in Oldham County. Along with that, other documents that we have are subdivision regulations and various ordinances like the nuisance fire hydrant or corridor overlay districts. So we have, I believe it's 13 different topics, and Judge, if you would like me to, what I'd like to do is take the first 6 or so all the way down to the capacity standards for cluster mailboxes and even the landscape regulations. I'm going to ask Amy Alvey to give you a brief overview of all of these. And we're going to go through these briefly because I believe this first set that we're going to talk about is fairly easy to comprehend. We're making some grammatical changes, we're making some strike-throughs, a few additions, all to clarify our regulations. And if we take that group in fairly quick order, it'll give us more time to go through things like the sign regulations and the ones after that that will probably end up in more discussion. So if you don't mind, I'll turn this over to Amy, and we'll go through those.
Judge?
Oh, sorry.
I don't know that we need to go through all the editorial cleanup and maintenance that's been done, and that seemed to be what most of this first part is. I'd rather see us spend our time on the new material that's in there, and based on that and the fact that I know the people on the Planning Commission, I served on the Planning Commission, and I helped write some of what's in here, I may move that we accept the revisions, as Jim has described, that came from the Planning Commission and the SRC and the public meetings, just the revisions.
All right, we've had a motion to move forward and accept the revisions that have been made. Any discussion on that? Commissioner Hawkins?
In a public hearing like this, are we allowed to do that without giving due time?
No.
We're not allowed.
No. We'll have to have public, it's a public hearing. I don't think we can go ahead and accept, we can put it on the, I think what we're making a motion here is putting it on the floor. We're going to have a public hearing before we have a vote, so.
I was hoping to preempt that.
Well, I don't think we can. It still has to be a public hearing. The opposition has to have a chance to speak.
I made a list of things that I think are what Magistrate Harrison has made a motion about. Can I put that up on the overhead and you determine whether the first and the second include those items? Sheila, can you put on the overhead, please?
Let me, okay.
And
well,
at least it'll be.
before we do that, I knew this was going to get complicated because there's a lot of stuff in it. Why don't we let him go ahead with his revisions? Okay, go ahead, Jim, and then I'm going to let anybody, let me ask this right now. Is there anybody in the audience here today who is here today to speak against any aspect of the revisions that have been put forward by the Planning Commission? We have no opponents here. I imagine there are a few people who would speak in favor of them if need be. Is that correct? Or do they want to speak without need be? All right, well, let's determine if the fiscal court wants to go through the revisions before we go through the revisions.
Well, can I put up what I think, again, are the easy subjects?
That's fine with me.
I think if you see what they are, and I've prepared something, and that way you know exactly what, and I'll confirm that that's what your motion is in second.
Which ones were you
So, in particular, the items that are fairly administrative are Division 330, the exemptions and modifications. In particular, and is Section 330.020. And under the yard requirements, if you remember at the first reading, Magistrate Tice had recommended that we strike a part of that which says the setback must observe that of the adjacent property. And that was proposed in reading number 1. So that's part of the revisions that you're considering. Section 330.040, there's a section on site triangle. It's fairly simple. 330.060, water supply and sewage disposal. And again, we can go over these changes, but they're fairly minor. In Division 360, under building permits and fees, 360.010, the building permits required. 030, building permit procedure. 035, agricultural buildings, and 040, construction equipment. And again, I'm trotting through these just because they are fairly simple. In Division 370, under administration, enforcement, and penalties, Section 370.010 under administration, 020 under enforcement, 030 under compliance with subdivision regulations, and 040 under administration and incorporated areas. And then we have Division 420. We've added a lot of definitions, and typically at the SRC, we've researched definitions and proposed the best ones that we thought. We had public discussion on them, and the SRC approved them. And then the key there is that in case we don't have a particular definition in our regulations, that we are asking to adopt the APA, which is the American Planning Association Dictionary. And that way we can rely on it, and everybody else who's looking at our regulations can understand if we don't have a definition, you go to that document. And then under Division 270, the capacity standards, in particular, we're going to add 270.080 regarding cluster mailboxes, which is a requirement of the U.S. Postal Service. And then in Division 300, the landscape regulations under 030 and the applicability. So those are the pieces, in my opinion, that were fairly easy to understand. We can go over those if you really want to, but that would then take all of those, if you would consider it, and adopt those portions. Now, Magistrate Harrison, if you were intending other pieces of it, just point it out, or if there's something that you don't agree with.
No, I'm fine with your list. If you like, I'll include that in the motion, that we accept this, the list and these items, because they're merely cleanup. It's not really anything of substance.
All right, so we have a, what, would you want to restate your motion, please?
The original motion was to accept, based on the Planning Commission, Study Review Committee, and the public process, the recommendations for revisions that amount more to editorial cleanup in the text than anything else. And to be more specific now, I will include the items shown by Mr. Urban and just explained as part of the motion.
And I second that.
Okay. All right, now we're open to discussion. Anybody like to discuss the motion? Magistrate Tice?
Just to check that I'm right, in the list we've got up there, it says 300 landscape regulations. And another piece of paper that came from me, it said, it says 330.
Yes, the 300 is the division, and 030 is the only place where the applicability is changed. That's the only part of the landscape regulations that are being revised.
But I'm talking about the original. It's where it says 300 here. I'm looking, wait just a second. Look at this. That's what I'm referring to. This piece
I did say 330.
It says landscape
Typo,
regulations.
it's a typo.
And that's fine if it is typo, but let's get it either 300 or 330 if what I'm guessing is correct.
I think Magistrate Tice, you're talking about, here.
330.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it should be
Exactly.
300.
It
That's
should be-
just a typo on.
So it should have
just
been 300. Okay, that's all I'm getting at.
It's
That's
correct
all I
in
was
the
asking.
ordinance.
So I'll
Right,
change
the
that to
ordinance is
300.
correct. That was part of a PowerPoint that was
Okay.
incorrect. Yes, but good catch.
Well, Magistrate Hawkins.
Under the second one, building permits and fees, 360-035 agricultural buildings. We've added building permits for agricultural buildings will not be assessed an application fee unless inspections are requested. I asked you all this the other day, what circumstance would no inspection be required? And the answer is if the person building the building doesn't want an inspection. And so my next question is, what does an inspection consist of? And why wouldn't we do an inspection on a building being built?
That's a very good question, because I always ask the applicant why they wouldn't want an inspection. It's not a guarantee, but it shows that we've looked at the construction requirements to make sure it's not really the Better Business Bureau, but it assures that it's constructed, especially the footers and framing of a building, to comply with the Kentucky Building Code. Agricultural structures are exempt by state statute. We ask for a building permit because we want to make sure that they still have to comply with the setbacks. And so when you get a building permit, it assures that they're not placed incorrectly on the property. And if a person really was caring about their building, they would ask for inspections, but they're not required, so it would be voluntary.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions? So I want to understand what we're doing here, because I'm a little bit confused right at the second. Being honest about it. Mr. Greenwell?
I think we're speaking in serious generalities and not pinpointing this near enough. The motion was whatever the revisions were grammatically. I think it ought to be, I mean, is this list on here what your motion is?
Yes.
Okay.
Those are the only revisions in the proposal.
On this sheet?
Yes.
All right. Does everybody have this sheet? All right. We're talking about revisions, not anything new.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Is there any further discussion on that?
Well, Judge, just to be clear for everybody, we're still going to go through, there are 5 other categories that we're going to have discussions about. Sign regulations, agritourism buildings, lighting regulations, agricultural business district, and distilleries, breweries, and barrel warehouses and brew pubs. Those are still going to be discussed. This is just the kind of the get beyond some of the easy recommendations.
All right. All right, everybody got a handle on that? Okay. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, what section are you going to?
So we're gonna start with section 250.075 residential care facilities. Let me get to that.
What page is that in our book here?
I'm not sure what page it is listed on there. It's right after the cluster mailboxes. It's Division 250.075. They're not in order in your packet by division. So you should see, there should be a graphic in your packet that shows the picture of cluster mailboxes. It's the one, then there's landscape regulations, and then it talks about Division 250 special standards for residential care facilities.
Oh, yeah, all kinds of signs.
250.075.
Is this the page we're talking about, Amy? You put that on the overhead, that way everybody else can see it, please.
Sheila, can you flip it back, please?
There you go. Well, I don't even have that.
It's in your book. I promise it's in there. It's current regulation. Division 420, community residences.
the 14th page in the packet.
All right.
14 pages back.
Got it? Yay.
Past definitions.
Yes,
Keep going.
All right.
right past landscape regulations.
See what you got.
Right behind landscape.
And landscape is just one single
Community
paragraph.
residence, I have it, thank you. Okay,
Look, can you flip it back? I'm sorry.
okay. Okay,
Okay, so we're all on task of Division 250 Special Standards. The first section outlines definitions for community residences, developmentally disabled individuals, and remove them from the conditional use permit side. As I was researching other regulations through KRS 100, I came across a specific section of KRS 100.984 that spoke to residential care facilities. So the state statute says that residential care facilities are a permitted use anywhere where a regular single-family home would be allowed, and they're allowed by right. So it specifically says no conditional use permit, not required, otherwise required for residences within a zone or land use category shall be required for the operation of a residential care facility. So basically they're saying that anywhere that regular residential housing is allowed, a residential care facility is a permitted use as well. So residential dwellings are allowed in the zoning districts as listed, the AG1, CO1, R1A, R1, R2, R2A, R3, R4, R4A, T, O1, O2, and CN. So basically what we're doing is we're removing our old definitions and our old regulations to be in compliance with KRS 100-984 regarding residential care facilities. So we're looking to adopt the state definition of person with a disability, the definition for residential care facility, as well as the definition for services.
Judge.
Yes, and those were in the section 420 that you recently adopted. Those were already included in there.
Are we going to take these section by section and vote on them?
I think we should.
Yes,
That
yes.
would be easiest, sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe so. As we have them listed, you know, the 250-075, then you open it up to anyone that's here to speak in favor or opposition, and then make the motion.
I just
from there.
looking for the procedure, so I'm,
And Amy, these are already, we already have them in Sycamore Run and Apple Patch, right?
Correct. The ones in Sycamore Run are more than a residential care facility because I can't remember the name. It's I believe an ICF, which is the patients there are required to have 24-hour nursing care, and they have different regulations regarding clean linens versus dirty linens, and they're required to have a backup generator, things of that nature. So those are a little bit different. The ones in Sycamore Run, they were the first ones in the state of Kentucky to have that type of facility. But Cedar Lake, Apple Patch, things of that nature, they would no longer be required to get a conditional use permit. It's permitted by right per KRS 100-984.
Is there a motion to approve this section?
second.
Moved and seconded. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to the changes that have been described for this section? Seeing no one, I'll close the public comment. Any further discussion from magistrates? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Next.
Okay, the next section that we're going to speak on is Division 290. This is the update to the sign regulations regarding content removal. If anyone has attended the David Pike seminars, I'm sure he has touched on the suit of Reed versus the town of Gilbert, but basically this was a lawsuit that a church went against the town of Gilbert because they said that they were not being allowed to put their signs out based on the content of the sign. So it went to the U.S. State's District Court, and then the Supreme Court eventually was in agreement with Mr. Reed, saying that those signs were basically freedom of speech. So we have been advised that we are to update our sign regulations to remove anything that would interpret the regulation and the placement and basically the placement of the sign based off the content. So if you have to read the sign to determine if it's allowed or not, that is considered an illegal sign. So we also made the only other changes that were made to the sign regulations. There were no changes to increasing setbacks, heights, sign allowances, or anything of that nature, other than in the electronic sign regulations. It currently reads that it is 20 square feet and 30% of the allowable sign area. And every sign company that we've worked with permitting, the typical, like a standard sign is a 24 square foot sign and not a 20. So we're looking to move that to 24 square feet, but it also caps out. It's 50% of the allowable sign or 24 square feet, whichever is less. So someone, as an example, had they were allowed 40 square feet of sign area. They would only be allowed 20 square feet of electronic sign. So it's whichever is less of the two. And that electronic goes towards the total sign allowance. So they wouldn't get 40 square feet plus 20. So 40 square feet would encompass the whole sign area that is allowed. So I'm not sure how deep you all want me to get into the division of the sign regulations here, but this first section that talks about the purpose of the sign regulation was the one that had the most, I would say, grammatical changes to it, just for text and content, but we just kind of reorganized those sentences there. So that's Division 290.010. Under applicability, the first thing that we put in here, that the division must be interpreted in a manner consistent with the First Amendment guarantee of freedom of speech. So we put that in there to say that that we understand that we cannot limit freedom of speech for signs. And then number 3, that signs not permitted being allowed by right or by permit under this division may be reviewed by the Board of Adjustments as a conditional use permit. So if someone has a sign that doesn't fit into the regulations that we have written, they can go to the Board of Adjustments through the public hearing process and apply for a conditional use permit. Definitions that were removed from the portion of the sign ordinance, things such as banner, billboard sign, nameplate, off-premise, private sale, all of those are types of signs that are based off the content of the sign. Board of Adjustments, there's a definition of Board of Adjustments in our section 420, so I'm not sure why it was listed again in the sign definitions, but it's not needed. But again, like a real estate sign, to know that it's a real estate sign, you have to read the actual sign to know that's, a home's for sale or a home's for rent. So we cannot regulate those signs based off the content of the sign. We did add a definition of snipe sign. These are temporary sign of 6 square feet or less, made of vinyl, polyboard, corporeless, corrugated plastic, plastic core, wood or plywood, including signs with wood or wire frames, posts, or stakes. So those are your typical, what we call snipe signs or yard signs. So we did not have a definition of that in our regulations, so I added that in there. Political signs, we added to our current definition the regulation of KRS 117-35 regarding campaign-free zones. Just so if someone looks at our regulations, it will refer them also to the state regulations of where they can place them in relationship to voting precincts. And then temporary signs, we added that it is a sign or advertising display that is portable and or constructed of cloth, canvas, fabric, plywood, or other light material. And we took out the definition, or the portion of the definition that talks about displayed for 30 days or less, and in the applicable approved sign permit, because that's addressed in the temporary sign section of the ordinance. We get a lot of calls about if a sign is, they're just replacing the cabinet, the sign face, it's an existing cabinet. There's nowhere in our regulations that says that if you change just the sign face, that there's no review and no fee. So we added in here that sign permits are not required for the placement of sign cabinets as long as the sign area, height, location are not being changed. A sign permit shall be obtained prior to the reuse of an abandoned sign, which we have a definition for, and must comply with the current sign regulations. And then we struck the next sentence and just relocated it to the paragraph below that talks about the permitting process and the fees. Exempt signs. So, item number 5 that's in your regulation. All of that information was relocated under each zoning classification for the signs. It didn't make a lot of sense. Staff knew to look where it talks about how many signs, how many freestanding signs you're allowed, or how your wall signs are figured, but it wasn't listed under each zoning classification. So we just relocated that under each commercial and industrial zoning district for clarification purposes. So that was not a strike from the regulation, it was just a relocation. Under exempt sign standards, the following were removed. Again, these are all content-based signs, so there's no need for them to be listed specifically, because again, we do not regulate content. And language was added, number 1 and number 2, to cover the above sign that exempts wall signs of 2 square feet or less, as well as freestanding signs of 6 square feet or less, and allows 1 per road frontage with property owner approval. So if someone was having a special event or something, the language that was added for items 1 and 2 in your proposed regulations, that will cover special event signs, private sale signs, real estate signs, things of that nature. They're covered under items 1 and 2 of 290-060. Again, political signs were addressed in the definition section. Flag regulations were also updated in this section as well. Previously, they had a limit on the number of flags, so now we have no limit on the number of flags, but you're limited on your total square feet, total area, with a maximum height of 35 feet. So you could have 4 or 5 flags rather than maybe just your American flag, your state flag, and your county flag. As an example, you could have more flags if you wanted, but not more than 60 square feet in total area. Again, electronic signs, as I spoke to you earlier, the square footage of electronic signs we're proposing shall not exceed 50% of the total allowable square footage of the freestanding or monument signs for the zoning district in which the sign is located, and shall not exceed 24 square feet, whichever is lesser. So again, the max that any electronic sign could be, regardless of the allowable size, is 24 square feet, but they're only allowed 50% of the sign area. Again, it's whichever is less.
So 24 square feet, that's, let's say, 6 feet wide, 4 feet tall?
Like a sheet of plywood, a 4x6 sheet of plywood would be 4 by, no, that's 32. Oh, 4x, yeah, sorry.
All right,
A small sheet of plywood.
Let's say the sign, the electronic sign at 146 and 393, then you measure that, that might be out of compliance. Oldham County High School sign.
Well, it wouldn't affect any existing signs that are out there now. Those were already in existence prior to this regulation. The schools do not get sign permits through our department. They
Just do what they want to do.
exempt from local regulations when it comes to signs.
Say that anywhere?
Not that we're aware of, but it would be the same as like liquor, because a lot of schools are located in zoned residential properties and not commercial as well, so. Section 290-100, permanent signage. It previously was called on-premise signage, so we were removing item 1A regarding subdivision construction signs. A lot of times that'll be the ones that you'll see in the front of the subdivision that shows the lot layout and says coming soon or something of that nature. we are eliminating those because they are content-based and will allow 2 identification signs at the subdivision entrance. So they'll have one main sign and then they can have their construction entrance or construction sign. This includes apartments and condos. There's no increase in the size allowance. Again, we are not proposing any changes in setbacks, height, or sign allowances. Sign calculation details were added to all non-residential zoning classifications, so that was just kind of a cleanup on that. In item 2, R4 high density residential district sign regulations were just reorganized so it flows better. So there's no increase in that size allowance as well. Temporary signage, the regulations were updated to consolidate temporary freestanding signs, wall signs, and banners into one area. Previously, they were broken out by category, so we've combined them all into one section since they're considered temporary. And temporary signs will be allowed 1 per calendar quarter and not exceed 32 square feet. And again, there's no increase in the size allowance as it was noted in the previous ordinance. Non-conforming signs, the only change in that section was we added the word abandoned sign to the discontinued, obsolete, or non-conforming signs. So that's a brief and very quick overview of the sign regulations. So basically, if someone comes in and applies for a sign permit, we ask them to give us the size, the type of sign that it is, whether it's a wall sign, a freestanding sign, monument, the location, meaning what is the setbacks, because that determines the size and the height of the sign. We cannot determine the use of the sign or the location or the size based off what the sign actually reads. So all size allowances and setbacks remain the same except as previously discussed on the electronic signs. So I know that's a lot of information. Be happy to answer any questions.
Amy, I'd like to ask you here, under exempt sign standards,
Should we make a motion first and then go in discussion?
okay.
I'll make a motion, we accept Division 290 regarding the sign regulations, please.
Second.
All right, now discussion. First of all, is there anybody here who would like to speak in opposition to the proposed sign ordinance changes?
Or in favor.
Well, yeah, I mean, okay. All right, you can speak in favor, sure, that's all right. Okay, anybody want to speak in favor of it? You want to speak in favor of it? All right.
Yes, sir.
All right, you see no one wants to speak. All right, now we can take, let's go on to the fiscal court here. Anybody like to discuss this? And should die.
Why are the schools exempt again? I missed something there.
They have never applied in previous administrations before Mr. Irvin came back. I don't know the best way to explain it. They get building permits for anything that they get, but they do not get sign regulations because they feel they are regulated by the state and not on the local level.
Okay, I understand that. So does that apply to would that apply to any government building? Does it apply to all government buildings too?
Well, I'm going to back up a little bit to, in 1984, there was the Intergovernmental Act of Congress that said government shouldn't interfere with government, and that's really the basic premise for things like post offices and government buildings not requiring to comply with zoning regulations. And for the most part, that's why things like institutions, churches, and whatnot are permitted uses in most of our zoning classifications. And when it comes to building permits, I always say this: you should get one. Why? Because, again, in particular with signs, we want to make sure that it meets the setback requirements. And I don't believe that anybody's exempt from that. So we've reached out to the Board of Education in the past. They haven't had any new signs recently. So when John Black was judge executive and I was the planning director, we used to get building permits all the time. So we're working in cooperation with them on the comprehensive plan, and we've had discussions about getting permits. And they do get electrical permits through us, and they get building permits through the state. It only boils down to the signs. So,
Okay, thanks.
Measure Likens.
Thank you, Judge. I just want to make it clear in my mind that any of these distances, setbacks, sizes can be applied for a variance in any specific case, and it goes before the Board of Adjustments and Appeals if someone wants to put in a larger sign or change something that we're passing here, they can ask for a variance for that.
Just a second, let me see. Section 270-170 says they can only ask for a variance to a permit setback of a sign that's up to 25% less than the required setback. So if they wanted to move the sign closer to the street, they can apply for a variance of that, and they can apply for a height variance of up to 25%. And the city of LaGrange does not allow height variances. So if they wanted some type of sign that didn't fit into the regulation, those are the only two types of variances that they could apply for.
Thank you.
All right, Magistrate Hawkins.
Thank you. I would like to speak on the case of Reed versus the town of Gilbert. It says the church was cited, the church being Reed, was cited for exceeding the time limits for displaying temporary directional signs and for failing to include an event date on the signs. So without the date on the signs, the ordinance could not be enforced. It was just an arrow, say, with no date on it. And in their code, they had three tiers of temporary signs. And the first tier of the temporary signs in their code was ideological signs, and they are the most favorable, according to the town of Gilbert. The second a little bit less favorable than the ideological signs was the political signs. And then treated even less favorably than the political signs was the, quote, temporary directional signs relating to a qualifying event, quote. And that was that third tier of the temporary signs that endured the most scrutiny. So this whole Supreme Court case was based on the town's regulations of temporary signs. It didn't have anything to do with, off-premise signs or removing definitions of any other sign. It was the content of the temporary signs which was against the First Amendment. So just the content of just the temporary signs. I know you referenced a local lawyer who gave a talk, and I'm sure it was a good talk. But I just wanted to, we're doing all this based on a Supreme Court case that was based on just temporary signs and the content of just the temporary signs and scrutinizing one over another. And that was what was found to be against the First Amendment. So in my opinion, keeping the definitions in the ordinance ensures the county and the planning and zoning operates within the boundaries of what is definitively stated in the ordinance. And we're not restricting content by keeping the definition of the off-premise sign, keeping all those definitions. However, it is just ensuring that everybody's operating within the boundaries of what is definitively stated in the ordinance. So I think we should keep the definitions in, and I think that they should stay, because that's how and I've got a copy of this Supreme Court case and all of the statements on it, if anybody would like to read it.
Judge.
Magistrate Albert Harrison. The other thing.
I have a question for Magistrate Hawkins. Are you reading from the entire Supreme Court case, or are you reading from somebody's summary of it?
No, here.
And no, I'm just curious, because there are a lot of legal publications out there that do not contain the entire case and everything, just there's somebody else's summary of it, which amounts to somebody else's opinion of it, just as you have an opinion of what it says.
I understand that. No, this is from each Supreme Court justice.
It's from what?
It's from each person on the Supreme Court, excuse me. They've each, so in this Reed versus Town of Gilbert, Arizona packet, each Supreme Court justice has summarized why they agreed or disagreed on the case. And so it's fascinating. They all have sort of said the same thing, that it was the temporary signs that was the content of. It didn't have anything to do with off-premise signs. It didn't have anything to do with anything else. It was that level, that third tier of temporary sign that was the most scrutinized. And it was because you could put a political sign out, which would have been that second tier, for 3 weeks. But these particular signs, they were scrutinized more because they didn't have a time, location, or any of that on the sign. There was just arrows stating church services here, and they had about 20 of them in a certain area. And so it was that was regulated in stating that they had to be up within an hour of the end of the service, which wasn't, so that was being scrutinized a little bit more heavily than, say, a political temporary sign, which could stay for 3 weeks. So Pastor Reed said, how can mine stay up for only an hour past my church service, and a political temporary sign stay up for 3 weeks, and then an ideological sign stay up for even longer? So it was the content on the temporary signs, the varying degree of scrutiny that was against the First Amendment. You can't say to a church, you must pick up your sign within an hour of the end of your service, but to a politician, your temporary sign can stay out for 3 weeks. So it was the varying tier of the temporary signs that was against the First Amendment, and that's what they all determined, all of the justices. So
are we doing something illegal here, in your opinion, as a non-attorney?
well, I think that, thank you for pointing that out. I think as we're taking off the definitions of, say, off-premise signs because they are against the First Amendment, or taking out definitions of any other sign, what a billboard is, and saying that that's against the First Amendment, I think that the definitions should stay, because having the definitions in there only reinforces the code.
So it boils down to this. If you have to read the sign, then you are determining that it's not appropriate for that location. So whether it's a temporary sign or a permanent sign, it doesn't matter. We've been going through that training, and we've been advised to remove everything from our sign regulations, or the entire sign regulations could be upheld as being inappropriate if you have to read a sign. So whether it's temporary or permanent, it does not matter, according to the advice that we've gone through in training. And so the word off-premise sign, the only way you know it's off-premise is by reading it. So even if it was a permanent sign that somebody wanted to put at a corner because it had better visibility for a property down the street, you have to read it to know that it doesn't belong there because that's down the street. So it would be, we can't do that. So off-premise, the term off-premise is not needed in our regulations.
Magistrate Hounds.
Part of the, I'm sure the person that gave us advice on the signs, it was David Pike.
Yes.
And prior to being a magistrate, I did attend the classes when I was on the Code Enforcement Board. And since being a magistrate, I've attended now 2 seminars that Mr. Pike has put on. I consider him to be a subject matter expert. He practices zoning regulations all across the country, including Alaska. That's his favorite place to go, but that's another story. If Mr. Pike suggests that we make these changes, then I think he's a subject matter expert, and we ought to fall in line with that, because if he comes to our county and challenges one of your zoning regulations, he's going to pull it out and he's going to throw down the hammer and walk right out the door, and the case is going to fall apart. So I think we ought to take the subject matter expert for their opinion, knowing that person being an authority in zoning regulations, including signs.
Any further discussion about this section?
Judge.
All right. Magistrate Hawkins.
I also wanted to challenge the concept of needing to go up from 30% to 50% on the electronic signs, and going from 20 square feet to 24 square feet. I don't think that follows the sort of what we are looking for to increase the value of the county. So, just my opinion.
Well, I'd like to ask you again a question, though. I think when we asked about electronic signs a few minutes ago, I was told about the size of normal size without a waiver would be about the largest would be about the size of a piece of plywood. Is that right?
24 square feet would be the maximum.
Okay, but tell me if I'm wrong, county engineer. Isn't a piece of plywood 4 by 8?
That's, Chris Hounds just brought that up. I said it was a small piece of plywood.
Yeah.
Chris corrected that as well. So,
Did you
yeah.
bring that up?
Yeah, it's
Well, that's
32
square.
square feet.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, to me, that's ridiculously small. I mean, you know, what can you do besides, you know, you can't communicate a message on something 4 by 20, 4 by 6, I don't think, because you can't be seen.
Maybe that's the point.
Well, it shouldn't be the point, though. I disagree completely with Magistrate Hawkins. We're heading toward a era of more and more electronic signs. I don't personally find them offensive. Some people do, but the cost of recreating signage all the time is very expensive. I've been over to Indiana. They show you a billboard along the highway that changes. You know, you can see it. It's I don't know how big it is, but it looks to me like
than
it's
4 by
about 40 by 60 or
It's a
something,
sheet
you know.
It's 4
But
by 8,
I
4
don't find it offensive. I find them informational myself. And we had this issue a few years ago with one of the mayors of LaGrange wanted to do away with all the signage. You know, wanted them very subtle, very hidden. I don't think you can attract business to your town if they can't be found. No one wants to. I was in Chicago once trying to find a hotel, you know, in a suburb. You know, they had that idea there. I couldn't find the place. I was totally lost. You couldn't see a sign anywhere. Didn't know where to go. It was before, you know, whatever, you know, your computer.
GPS.
Before GPS, but I personally don't find them. I think they can be operated in an offensive way, but they don't necessarily have to be offensive. Everything doesn't have to be fireworks and tornadoes. It can be something presented nicely. I think at the Kentucky Center for the Arts on Main Street in downtown downtown Louisville, there's electronic signs out there. They're very pretty, I think, and they just have a static picture on them and they're changed. But if you had to redo that artwork in a non-electronic fashion every time, it costs a lot more money to put it out there. So that's my opinion. Okay, Magistrate Tice.
But you do have the option of getting a variance so that you can get a larger sign.
There was
A
language.
lot of cases would be a more, and there are cases where you gotta have a big sign.
Now look at Yum Center.
So that we can approve that for the larger signs.
It would go to the Oldham County Board of Adjustments. It would not come to fiscal court. It would go to the appropriate, either LaGrange Board of Adjustments, Oldham County Board of Adjustments, or Pee Wee Valley Board of Adjustments.
I would say one thing is that if we're erring, it's all on the side of being careful rather than on the other side. So what we're actually doing is increasing from 20 to 24, which is making it bigger. And I understand what you're saying, but I think there is remedy for the person that needs the larger size. And as far as economic development, what would make sense, we could accommodate the client, so.
Judge. Measure Harrison.
I'm not sure that's what I heard. I thought you had the caveat in there that could go to the Board of Adjustments, but you had a limitation there of how much variance it could be for the height of it and also for the size of it.
Let me look. Let me find it. But it- Right. So they can only apply for variances on height and setback up to 25%. It doesn't say they can't apply for size on here.
What page are you on, Amy?
I
It's
thought you had a percentage of size increase.
no, just setback and height. So if they want to apply for a variance, the max variance that they could apply for height and setback is 25%. They would still apply for it, but it doesn't limit them on size of the sign.
So at a 35-foot maximum that we've got now, they could increase it possibly 8.5 feet,
Yes, sir.
which means
If
you would
that's
never have
25%.
McDonald's, you never have Cracker Barrel.
Correct.
Never have what's.
Correct.
Cracker Barrel or McDonald's. Cracker Barrel sign's 150 feet.
Some franchises have sign packages such as dealerships and stuff, and they will go to the planning commission for a program of signs, because for their franchise authority, and able to get it at that location, they're required to have X amount of signs with that type of height. If that's the instance, then they would go to the planning commission for a review of program for signs, because they would have multiple wall signs, multiple freestanding signs, things of that nature. It's not your typical sign package that you would see.
What would the planning commission do that the Board of Adjustments cannot do? I'm still confused. You're saying that the planning commission can grant
Planning
a
commission-
waiver, variance, or something?
It's called a program for signs. It's in the
What, program for si-
program for signs,
All right.
and it's in the sign regulations, and that's
Okay.
reviewed by the planning commission, not the Board of Adjustments.
Okay.
It's an entire package plan and not necessarily variances or waivers.
And they review for appropriateness and either approve or deny or recommend changes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, so are you saying that if we pass this ordinance, we're not going to see another Cracker Barrel sign in Oldham County that's sticking up there,
They would
150?
have to do a program for signs. There's
I
no
know.
changes we're not proposing any changes to the height or the setback or the sign allowances at this time.
Yeah, I'm not understanding what's
So they would
program
have-
for signs. What do we mean by that?
They would have to go to the planning commission with their entire sign package required by their franchise authority, and then the planning commission would determine the appropriateness of those signs. Does it fit in the community? Does it not fit in the community? Make suggestions of, does it really have to be that tall or not that tall?
So as
Because
an
it's-
example, the Tri-County Ford, the new dealership, came in with a program for signs. So they have a pole sign next to the interstate, and they have a monument sign or pole sign at 393, and all of their sign package on their walls that said Ford, not the ones that are directional, came into the planning commission for that program for signs, and it was approved.
Because it's outside of what the standard sign ordinance. So if you had something that was a franchise authority that required certain heights of signs and so many wall signs and something of that nature, it would go to the planning commission at a program for signs.
Okay.
As a
Well,
entire
as you
sign
know,
package.
we're trying to attract things at 393 and
Mm-hmm.
I-71, and we
they-
certainly don't want to put something in that's going to be a negative incentive
And there's no
or
changes,
disincentive to
again.
come here.
And there is. Again, they go through a process and have it all reviewed.
Judge. To your exact point, and you and I talked about this earlier, there's a restaurant that bluntly said, we will not come to a community if our sign package is not approved. We have to have head count inside the restaurant. So the ordinance that we're approving today, as you and I talked earlier, again, not making any changes to it, it would just be a package deal. They want to build their whatever restaurant, they would bring the plan in for the restaurant, as well as the signage, and it gets approved as a package.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Because that's exactly, if I could use it, exactly what Ford did. So we have the capability of doing it if we see that the person wants it, fits the community, and we're okay with that. But we also, on the other side, if somebody comes in and they want this other appropriate package, then we can also say no, and they say, well, then we're not going to locate, which may be what we want
That's
to
the
do
risk, that's the
anyway.
risk that we run.
So what the example is something what planning and zoning has actually already done.
Correct.
Yeah, so we have that ability, and we've already used it, which is evident at 393 with the board. So anything else that goes down there, we have the
Yes.
complete ability to do to do what's right for the community, or what the board decides to do. So I think we're okay.
Any further Magistrate Dye?
I think we've just about wore this thing out. The only concluding remark I can make is on these signs, there's 25 pages of work that you all went through, and I've read it, and it's, when you get done reading it, your head's swimming. I mean, you really don't even want to think about the word sign. But on page 25, you've only got a small paragraph talking about non-conforming signs. So in my opinion, if you've got 24 pages of descriptions of signs and 2 paragraphs of saying what's non-conforming, I think y'all pretty much covered the whole kit and caboodle. Well, I'm going to vote for this thing because I know just as sure as I'm sitting there in a few years from now, somebody else is going to be sitting there and somebody's going to be able to stand out there and they're going to be changing it again.
And signs are probably one of the most difficult ordinances and regulations to write simply because of the application of those signs. So if you want to learn more, come to our office and we'll show you how to issue a sign permit.
And in reality, if you don't get what you want in these 24 pages, go to the Board of Adjustments, you've got a 50-50 chance to get it anyway.
Or the planning commission.
Or the Planning
Or the
Commission.
planning commission.
Correct.
Magistrate Hawkins?
Were there any changes to the C2 or C3 general, or the business districts regarding adding, because I see in blue, no more than 2 signs per parcel?
That's the language that was brought from the preamble of the zoning ordinance and placed in each zoning classification. So where it says parcel, the 600 feet, that language there, that says 600 feet, in which case a second freestanding sign shall be allowed. Yeah, that was in the preamble at the very beginning of the sign ordinance, and we placed that in under each zoning classification. So
Okay.
it's more than just on C1, C2, it's in all the zoning classifications.
So no change there.
Correct, there's no changes in sign height or size or
I'd like-
setbacks.
I'd like to address the franchise agreement. There are towns all over the country that accommodate for the sign ordinances in the location that they want to bring. For example, in Williamsburg, Virginia, the signs are not like Cracker Barrel's height or the McDonald's in LaGrange's height. They are in accordance to what is a much more conservative and lower sign ordinance. And the franchise agreements accommodate the sign ordinances in place. So I wouldn't worry about if a franchise is going to come or not based on increasing or decreasing the signs.
All right, I think we've got a motion on the floor, and we've had a second. We've discussed this. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Opposed?
Motion carries 8-1. Thank you. Next item,
Okay. Get past the signs here. So the next item is agritourism buildings. So as many of you have probably either attended or seen, the new fad is wedding barns. So the state came down with some regulations under House Bill 360 regarding agritourism and the repurposing of existing farm structures to places of assembly. So the definitions for agritourism and agritourism buildings, that is adopted by House Bill 360, so that is the state definition. But the purpose is to allow the public to visit working farms or any agricultural, horticultural, or agribusiness operation for the purpose of enjoyment, education, or active involvement in activities of the farm or operation, which means which allows the means of earning supplemental income that can help preserve and sustain local farms. Excuse me. So what we are proposing is to add these definitions to our regulations, as well as the agritourism buildings will be a conditional use permit, and the zoning classifications located there. So again, these are the definitions that are from House Bill 360, and an agritourism activity also includes, or a qualifying activities may include but not limited to weddings. So a lot of people think, well, you know, that not really agritourism, but the state has defined it as part of agritourism to help supplement the farm income. So the definitions, again, agritourism, agritourism activity, agritourism building, commercial kitchen, that is from the definition from the 2009 International Mechanical Code, which is the current code that the state uses. The definition of farm tour, and as well as what the definition of fire area is. So if someone wanted to convert an existing farm building into a place of assembly, such as for events and weddings, they would be required to get a conditional use permit through the appropriate Board of Adjustments. We've set standards in place, such as minimum lot size is 5 acres, so the property would have to be at least 5 acres. Bless you. All structures must be at least 30 feet from all the property lines. Minimum parking requirements, they have to have one standard or a typical parking stall, which is 9 by 18 for each 50 square feet of primary assembly area. That's similar to what we use for church, when we look at parking regulations for churches that don't have permanent seating. They shall be exempt from section 280-150 parking layout design item 2 markings, because in our zoning regulation it requires that all parking areas and driving surfaces are of non-dusting type. So in keeping with the rural character of the area of the farm, most of the time that you go to one of these events, you drive down the gravel road and you park in the field next to the barn. So it allows the farmer to continue to use the land for hay or corn or whatever they're doing. So we're allowing them to be exempt from that section of the regulations. And then they're required for the building code requirements, occupancy load calculations, and fire suppression requirements are all outlined by House Bill 360. So building code requirements are subject to change per Kentucky Building Code. So whatever, as the building codes update throughout the years, this just covers that. So as those codes change, they stay in compliance with those. But that's how occupancy is calculated, and whether or not fire suppression is required is based off occupancy levels. So that's all I really have on agritourism buildings. Again, this came down from the state, from House Bill 360.
Promotion that we accept this.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to accepting this section? Seeing no one, close public hearing. Any discussion among magistrates on this? Magistrate Hawkins?
As we go into later on Ag 2, Ag 2 isn't listed here, so will this have to come back to us at a later date if the Ag 2 gets approved?
We can add, you can make it part of your motion if it's if you want to add AG2 to that, if it is approved, make that potential, that zoning classification, if you would like.
Okay, and my other question was, it says that these agritourism buildings shall be exempt from the parking lot layout and design.
Correct.
Is that going to include the lighting design for parking lots? So, for example, will they not be under the scrutiny of the lighting regulations
No.
in their parking lot?
They will not.
They will not, so
Correct.
they'll be exempt from that. So potentially, they could have a light next to a neighborhood.
I've not seen a light pole, and most of the time it's temporary lighting, but I've not seen a light pole in the middle of the hayfield. So that's what this is for agritourism buildings. So I think in our lighting ordinance, it has in there, based off of the uses, things like that.
But these are also conditional uses, so if there were lights, they would be reviewed, and it could be subject to discussion from adjoining property owners or the Board of Adjustments.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And sometimes they add security lighting, and that's acceptable. So we do discuss lighting in these CUP applications.
All right, who made that motion? I did. Would you like to revise your motion to say that AG 2
Not until
is
we hear.
accepted if
Not until-
approved?
Okay, I will add that phrase to it, yes. If AG 2 is accepted, then we would add the two together.
Who seconded that?
Michael did.
Mike did. You all right with that? Okay. Good. All right. All right, any more questions on this? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Judge, may I
What?
say,
Pardon?
excuse me, I'd like to abstain from that because of the nature of my personal business, the agritourism
All right.
building. So one abstention,
Motion
please.
carries 8 to 1, but one abstention. Why don't we go ahead and do the AG2 right now, since I know this man from whatever, Channel 32, is that where you're from? He's probably going out of his mind, wondering if we're ever going to get to what he
So do
came
you
to
want to
hear
go to
about.
AG2, because that leads into barrel warehouses and
Yeah.
distilleries,
then-
and
then
then
we'll have
come back to lighting?
Let's come back to lighting.
Okay, sure.
All right, he's trying to get back to the station.
Okay, so if you forward in your document, probably 5 or 6 pages, you'll see a new zoning classification, which is AG2. Again, this is a completely new zoning classification, so anybody that wants to rezone their property to AG2 would go before the appropriate legislative bodies, either Fiscal Court, City of LaGrange, Pee-wee, or Crestwood. So the intent of the AG2 business district is to provide areas for agricultural development to allow the means of earning supplemental income that can help preserve and sustain local farms and contribute to economic base in rural areas of Oldham County. Everything is mirrored from the existing AG1 zoning classification, except for the items listed in blue under the permitted use, which is on the left side of the column there. So there's a new title that's called agricultural business. So we have added as a permitted use distilleries, craft distilleries, brewery, microbreweries, barrel warehouses, and farm implement repair. In AG1, farm implement repair is a conditional use. We moved it over to a permitted use because it is more of a business side of the farming industry. So we moved it over as a permitted use under AG2. The setbacks are exactly the same as AG1. The only difference on the property development regulations is that in order for a property to be zoned AG2, the minimum lot size is 1 acre is 5 acres versus 1 acre. So if someone wanted to rezone their property to AG2, the minimum lot size would be 5 acres. So that's really all I have on the AG2. So again, this would be a zoning change. There are no current properties owned in Oldham County zoned AG2.
I want to add, not to confuse matters, but the last time that we added a zoning classification is we went to an R4A. And those of you that have been around the county a long time, when condominiums and garden homes, patio homes were a development style, R4 is up to 16 units per acre, and most of the patio home developments were only about 8 units per acre, so we created a brand new zoning classification. We also have we created a PUD zoning classification and an IPD. So when we do this AG2, or this recommendation to AG2, there is not a single piece of property in the county that's currently zoned AG2. So anybody that wanted to do any of these uses would have to get a rezoning.
All right. Is there anyone here who would, do we have let's put this on, let's make it a motion here first of all. Is there a motion to accept this?
I'll make that motion, but I thought it already been made.
No.
Oh, okay, I'll make the motion.
All right, motion made and seconded. All right. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this right now?
Can I ask a question? Are we at that point almost?
Well, no one's standing up, so, Mr. Tice?
And as much as I've worked on this, as means I've gone to, What is the minimum lot size for AG2?
5 acres.
Why would that not be larger?
The state definition of agricultural use is 5 acres. So if you have 5 contiguous acres, irregardless of zoning, you can do an agricultural use on that property. So that's why we made it 5 acres.
The planning, not planning zone, excuse me, the
SRC.
EVA?
PVA says that it's 10 acres. Is that,
Taxing purposes.
That's for the agricultural exemption, not for agricultural uses. It's two different,
so in other words, to get an agricultural exemption, you've got to have 10 acres.
10 acres of working farm. So anything that's not, if you have 10 acres and you have a house and a pool, that doesn't count. It's 10 acre, you have to back the house out of that.
Got it. But we're saying 5 acres just to get the AG2
The minimum lot size.
minimum lot size.
because it complies with the state definition of
And is that
agricultural uses.
consistent with AG? Just with agricultural?
AG1?
Yeah,
No, AG1 is minimum of 1 acre.
that's what you said a minute. Okay,
Yes.
I'm clear. I'm okay now. Okay, thank you.
All right, Magistrate Likens.
Thank you, Judge. Reading through some of these setbacks, which is 500 feet, side yard, rear yard,
We
front
haven't gotten
yard.
to that part yet. We're only on the zoning district. We haven't gone to barrel warehouses yet.
Okay, okay.
We're only talking about this one.
We're only talking
Page.
about AG2. We've not moved on to barrel warehouses
It's
yet.
just creating a
We'll get
new zoning
Creating the new zoning
classification.
classification.
Well, including the permitted uses, yes,
Correct.
but not the particulars of those which are coming next.
Well, we
Brent
can't,
was
we
asking
can't vote on
questions.
this without discussing the particulars.
Well, you, yeah, I suppose not.
That's true.
So,
I was just referring to the training that we had to this. If you go to the front yard, rear yard, side yard, you ended up with you explained to us it was 20-something acres in order to get one of these.
Yeah, that, I have that
So
later
you'll
on
be
in the
going over
presentation.
that, I'm sure.
but this just creates a different district with these minimum standards. So the front yard's only 50 feet, and the side yard is 15, 75 next to a residential, and 50 feet on the street side. So it may not be necessary if we don't adopt the next section, which has different standards for those uses.
So I can be more than happy to go through the
Well,
next
Well, I
section.
mean, I'm, you know, my brain's not computing this. How can you say we're trying to adopt a section, a zoning classification, but we're not dealing with any of the particular uses within the
That's
classification
the
yet?
next section. It may be wise to go ahead and
Yeah.
withdraw the motions and let us go on to the next section, and then it'll be clearer for you.
Because if you don't approve anything on barrel warehouses and distilleries to be allowed out in a agricultural zoning classification, there's no need for an AG2.
I'll withdraw my motion, Judge.
Yeah,
would
you
still
gotta,
be
you gotta have the
farm implements and an
classification before you
AG1?
talk about barrel warehouses.
Conditional use permit.
You gotta have this classification before you can talk about barrel warehouses.
Right, but if we're not going to approve barrel warehouses, we don't need the classification.
Well, when you come back to it, you can adopt this if you care to first, and then the next section.
But
So-
you can back the barrel warehouses out of that then.
Sure.
What difference is the farm implement repair? If you take the barrel warehouses and the distillery stuff out, AG2's permitted use is farm implement repair.
Yeah, there's
Well,
other uses in
AG1,
that.
you can do it with a conditional
Conditional
use,
use
so
permit.
it's
So
not
I-
necessary.
yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and discuss the barrel. Let's get
Sure.
the thing on the
Absolutely.
floor here.
We've
Okay,
withdrawn.
so now we're gonna talk about distilleries, breweries, and barrel warehouses. So the first section that we're gonna go over is as if there was an AG2, you all just recently approved AG2, so we're gonna say that's in place. But again, there are no properties in Oldham County that are zoned AG2. So this would obviously go to the legislative bodies for a zoning change. So that time takes anywhere from 7 to 9 months from the time that they go through the technical review committee, planning commission level, and then to legislative body. So they're looking 7 to 9 months for the approval process of that. So these are the definitions that were adopted through Division 420 that are related to barrel warehouses, distilleries, and such. So barrel warehouses, brewery, brew pubs, craft distilleries, distillery, malt beverage, microbrewery, noxious emissions, and volatile organic compound. So what the proposed regulation is that if someone decides to rezone the property to AG2, so these would be the standards that they would have to meet as part of their development plan when it comes to the planning commission and you guys or cities as a legislative body. At least 25% of the land has to be dedicated to agricultural use. And that again is defined by Chapter 100, KRS Chapter 100, or preserved in a conservation easement. The maximum allowed building height shall be 60 feet. All structures shall have front, rear, and side yard setbacks of not less than 500 feet. No owner or operator shall construct or operate a facility with noxious emissions unless it is equipped with and utilizes the best available control technologies as determined at the time of construction and permit review. I'm just looking, hold on, let me find something. Facility tours, visitor centers, food service operations, restaurants, and sale of products produced on site and complementary products directly to consumers are permitted. Facilities or similar public gatherings which serve to promote the sale of locally produced products are permitted, provided any single event shall not exceed 56 continuous hours in length. Development plan approval. Prior to the issuance of the building permit of any structure, the applicant shall submit a development plan for review by the Planning Commission and legislative body. The contents of this plan shall include all items set forth in Division 390 of site plan regulations. So that's everything that a normal commercial development would go through. They will be required to have a traffic impact study as well as a landscape plan. And I do have a typo in my presentation. Your ordinance is correct. Item number 3 in your on your ordinance, it says all structures or uses except agricultural shall have front, rear, and side yard setbacks of not less than 500 feet. So agricultural uses, if they have hay or corn or something along the side property line, that can be within that 500-foot setback. But anything that is related to the distilling process or accessory use cannot be within that. So as it's in your packet, it says all structures or uses except agricultural shall have front and rear and side yard setbacks of not less than 500 feet. And then, no, it's correct in your ordinance. And then number 4 says, it talks about the best available control technology as regulated by the Kentucky Division of Air Quality and determined at the time of permit review. So as technologies improve, like right now there are no best available control technologies in place for barrel warehouses. That's not to say in 5 to 10 years from now there may be. So that's why we have in our regulation that's whatever the best available control technology at the time that they apply for their building permit, that's what they will be required to use. So then we go to barrel warehouses. Barrel warehouses, if located in AG2, the following provisions apply. So again, the 25% of the property shall be dedicated to agricultural uses or put in a conservation easement. They must have the BACT as determined at the time of construction permit review. The maximum building height is 60 feet, and all structures shall have front and rear side yard setbacks of not less than 500 feet. If they are located in I-1, light industrial, or I-2, heavy industrial, the following provisions, it's still capped at 60 feet. And again, we're talking about barrel warehouses at this point. Then they also have to have the best available control technology devices. They shall have a setback of 250 feet. When a barrel warehouse adjoins or is adjacent to a residential property, The setback along that property line is 500 feet, so it doubles in size when it abuts a residential use. It doesn't necessarily mean zoning, but a residential use. And then we talk about brew pubs. At minimum, 50% of the beer or malt beverage made on premise must be sold or consumed on site. Shall be a permitted use in C1, C2, C3, C4, I1, and IPD. These are all the same zoning classifications that allow restaurants. So we are allowing those in the same zoning classification as restaurants, and the parking requirements shall be the same as restaurants as listed in Division 280, off-street parking and loading requirements. So we go to AG barrel warehouses in AG1. So AG1 is an existing zoning classification. So at least 25% of the property shall be dedicated to agricultural uses, and then no owner or operator shall construct or operate a facility with noxious emissions unless it is equipped with the best available control technology as regulated by Kentucky Division of Air Quality Control. The maximum allowed building height shall be 60 feet, and they have a setback of 500 feet from all property lines. So if someone has existing AG1 zoned property in Oldham County, they would be required to get a conditional use permit through the appropriate Board of Adjustments, which is a public hearing process, and they would have to have a minimum of 500 feet setbacks on all property lines. So this is an example of one warehouse. So if a person had one warehouse that was zoned AG1 or AG2, those required setbacks are 500 feet. So a typical barrel warehouse is 100 feet by 200 feet. So if you do the math, the minimum lot size, if someone wanted to do one barrel warehouse in Oldham County in either AG1 or AG2, they would have to have a minimum of 30.3 acres. And that's if it's centered directly in a perfect square in the center of a perfect square lot. So another one, if they were to have two barrel warehouses on the property, there's a 100-foot setback between buildings if they are sprinkled. So if they wanted to have two on their property, they'd have to have 37.9 acres. If they wanted to have three, they'd have to have 45.5 acres. Another example is a barrel warehouse that would be located in I-1 or I-2, and it's surrounded by I-1 or I-2. They would have to have at minimum 9.6 acres. Oh, you're fine. Thank you. So if someone had property that was zoned industrial, they wanted to put a barrel warehouse on it, and it abutted residential use on just one side, they'd have to have a minimum of 13.6 acres to have one barrel warehouse. So it's not that you can have 5 acres and put a barrel warehouse on it, because the math just doesn't work. So this is just a summary page that just kind of goes through and shows distilleries and breweries where we're proposing that they would be a permitted use, craft distilleries and microbreweries, barrel warehouses, and then brew pubs. So this gives like kind of a summary sheet of the max height, the setbacks, what the setbacks are when they abut residential, and whether a permitted or conditional use. So, be happy to answer any questions.
All right, are there questions? Magistrate Logston.
Up to agricultural, because you were talking about residential.
If it's residentially used, it doesn't matter what the zoning is. But if, say, there's
I know a piece of property that's industrial that is beside agricultural. So how would that work?
Is it
since
used
you're
for
talking
residential purposes?
farm?
Then no. But if there was a subdivision that was zoned AG1 agricultural, but it's used for residential purposes, it would have to meet that 500-foot setback.
But I guess I'm not clear on, I guess my question is, if it backs up to, what's the setbacks on industrial backing up to agricultural? You're saying 500 to
250.
residential. Okay.
250. If it backs up to a residential use, it's 500.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, Magistrate Greenwell.
Thank you, Judge. I attended almost all of the SRC meetings as it pertained to barrel warehouses and breweries and pubs and all that. And I've never seen a pretty barrel warehouse. I've been all over the state of Kentucky, and I've just never seen a pretty one. I've seen brand new ones, and they weren't pretty. They weren't attractive. And so, just to put this very simply, bring on the breweries, bring on the brew pubs, leave the barrel warehouses out of Oldham County.
We don't have a motion yet, do we? All right, we have a motion on the floor to accept the recommendation as presented.
I'll make that motion, Judge.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, now, I should have, now, accept your comment at this point, but, all right, is there, anybody else like to discuss this? Magistrate Dye.
Yes, Judge. Having grew up in Shively, and there was a distillery not too far, Stitzel Weller, not too far from where I lived, I'm very familiar with the black mold. So I don't think 500 feet is near enough space between, and I understand you're talking about better technology that they'll have. I don't know how you would mitigate the black mold, but I don't think 500 feet is near enough.
That's on barrel warehouses, not, you're talking about
But we're
distilleries
talking
or
about
barrel
well, I'm
warehouse?
but I'm only speaking to the barrel warehouse. We're talking about approving this whole thing, aren't we?
No, you can exempt that out.
I tell you, I think I'm like Magistrate Greenwell. I think the barrel warehouses, I'm not saying they're not a good idea, and you're right, they're not pretty. Stitzel Weller wasn't pretty. It's, corrugated steel, blue, faded paint. I get it. But there is some ambiance to it. But I think that you need to keep residential and that kind of stuff as far away as possible. So if you can't do that, you shouldn't have them at all, in my opinion.
Magistrate Tice.
In reply to Magistrate Dye's comment, if you didn't allow the beer warehousing, then you wouldn't have the distillery coming to the community. So and that's fine. And if we don't pass it, I'm okay, either way. But I'm saying you won't get one with the distillery is the reason they locate, and the barrel warehouses, if you disallow any barrel warehouses but let them do a distillery in Oldham County, then the only thing you might find would be a micro distillery, and then they'll have trouble existing because then they'll have to sell their barrel warehouses to, just an example, either to Trimble or Jefferson or someplace else. That's not likely to happen. And I understand what you're saying, though.
Well, I can speak to that. There are still distilleries in the Shively area that they distill and they move their finished product to Lawrenceburg, Indiana.
Yeah, and because the Stitzel Weller, where I've been on the Bourbon Trail and been to that facility, and it is very sooty, whatever. And I think they've moved their barrel warehousing, if I'm correct, to Henry County. Is that the one that moved to Henry County? Pardon me? Well, they may be up there too, but I thought they had. But anyway, there is no air control on the warehouses. That's just the way it is. They've got the pollution control in the distilleries, so the distilleries are okay, but just, that's the reason you put these warehouses on big acres of land. In most of the state, it's 50 acres. Amy came up with the formula that she works with, actually gives us a more strenuous setback, but in all total acres, it's a little bit less than 50 acres. But it gets you a better setback on the side yard. It's similar to where we were with Dynegy when we brought Dynegy in, or welcomed them to come in the community. As their particulates move up and out, you've got to be able to have room for them to move out. And not every place in the county will be good for a distillery our barrel warehouses, as an example, the one tour that we took up in Franklin County, that it's down in a valley that doesn't breathe at all, and therefore the apparent soot or whatever it is lays all over the vegetation. So I understand your concern. I'm trying to think. Let me turn the floor over to somebody else. And then I can
Magistrate
briefly
Likens.
Thank you, Judge. Can you tell us where you came up with these 500-foot setbacks and what criteria that might have developed and put, that's
We
how
reached
we
out
got
to a
here?
local person who's in the industry and used them as a kind of an expert, if you will, on how the air is dispersed around these distilleries. And he actually is the one that came up with this example. If you look at a distillery, and let's just use a distillery for an example, and there's no air movement whatsoever, the quote-unquote fall zone of the air, if it just went up and dropped, would be 250 feet in all directions around that distillery. And so we thought, well, why not try 500 feet to double that distance? A lot of the regulations, Amy did a lot of research on all the regulations in adjoining counties that have distilleries and warehouses, and they use minimum lot sizes, but their minimum setbacks are a lot less than 500 feet. So we thought that regulating by setback, not by minimum lot size, was a much more logical way to protect adjoining properties. We then looked at the technology available for distilleries, like Magistrate Tice just mentioned. There is for distilleries, there is not for barrel warehouses, because the barrel warehouse is meant to breathe, but the reality is the atmospheric conditions are the same for a barrel warehouse as for a distillery. So this is a recommendation based on research of other zoning ordinances and local regional rather, counties, and then talking with experts. Well, that's where it started. And then the second example, so if you went to 2 warehouses, this again was talking with people in the industry about, well, what if you had 2 warehouses, they'd be separated, and again, if it's got a 500-foot minimum setback, and again, that's on a perfect rectangle or square and a perfectly flat piece of property. We did look at an example that was 185 acres that was not a square and put 500 feet all the way around it and ended up with only 35 acres of usable land. Again, that's because it was not a square. Every nook and cranny had a 500 foot, and in some places the land was really narrow. So you significantly reduce the amount of usable land when it's not a perfect square. But again, we thought that it was, after a lot of discussion with the study review committee, with experts, with the public, that it was reasonable to consider 500 feet.
Magistrate Hounds.
This is, everybody has their opinion about the barrel warehouses and the agritourism and what we're trying to do. It was brought to my attention a while back that we are quickly becoming the Napa Valley for bourbon in our area. If Oldham County wants to be part of the Napa Valley of bourbon, then we've got to look at this agritourism thing very seriously and understand the benefits that it could provide to us. I don't think anybody on court, including myself, wants to turn the green space that we have in farms, that I own property in, and want to turn them all into barrel warehouses. I don't think that's the intention of what we're trying to do. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to add another tool to the toolbox to bring folks into our county, to provide some tourism dollars, to provide maybe some economic development, I would hope, to us. I struggle with thinking that a distillery such as, I don't want to pick one, but a big distillery that are peppered throughout the Commonwealth is going to move their whole operation into Oldham County. I just don't see it. But with these micro distilleries, with maybe some expansion of some distilleries, some private label stuff that may be affordable to us, this makes sense. I'll tell you from the fire perspective, it scares me to death. We've seen warehouses collapse. We've seen warehouses burn. But there's a lot of warehouses that are being built that haven't fallen down, that haven't caught fire. And you're right. I agree with you, Magic Cream. Well, there's none of them that look pretty. I mean, there's none of them that are nice-looking buildings. But you could build these borough warehouses, and part of where we have in the I category today.
Correct.
And I'm not so sure. I like the idea of putting it out in the middle of 30. What was it, Amy?
1 acres.
30
acres.
30 acres, as opposed to putting it, I think where Magistrate Logston was going, in an industrial area that backs up to a farm that may be used as a residential community. I like the idea of putting it out, maybe further out in the county. I looked at a map this morning, and I don't know how many places we're going to put these. There's not very many places we're going to put them. I would suspect, and I could be totally wrong, that we're talking about maybe, I came up with 3 locations, maybe 5, but about 3 locations. And that's a very quick, I probably spent 20 minutes on it. So it's not like we're going to have a ton of these out there. But I think that it makes sense because we're on the I-71 corridor. I looked at what, I'm going to say it wrong, Japet Creek. Jephthah Creek. Some of the cool things that they've done in Shelby County, they just bought a drug dog for the Shelbyville Police Department. If they weren't there, would they have gotten that dog? $10,000. Maybe somebody else in the community would come up with that money. And I'm not saying a distillery is going to come in and buy a dog for the police department or a police car or whatever, but they had that opportunity. And if we don't pass something like this, then we've reduced our opportunity, and that's okay. That's okay. But just remember, you're limiting your scope now of what we can put into Oldham County. And the lay of the land, folks, does not permit a whole bunch of these being out there. It just doesn't.
All right, and I want to remind everyone here that we're magistrates discussing now. We're still in the public hearing, and anyone who would like to speak in favor of this or in opposition will have an opportunity before we cast a vote here. Magistrate Hawkins.
This isn't meant to be snarky. I just wanted to put the fact out there. The one expert that came to the SRC meetings, in his former job in this industry, he was painting the houses. Am I not right? Painting the houses around his facility?
Well,
Cleaning, not painting.
Cleaning. Every distillery that's next to properties, I don't care who it is doing some cleaning.
Okay.
Jim Beam's doing it in Claremont.
Yep.
And may I, Judge? May I have the floor?
Yes, go ahead.
And that's the one thing that that concerns me about, and we're talking about 4 or 5 different items that if we pass this, you could drop this out or add this or drop out any parts of this. So we're kind of covering a bunch of stuff that maybe at some point we're going to have to target in on a discussion. I'm concerned about industrial zoning in that you're close proximity to other buildings. When you take Jefferson County, like where Bob said that he grew up, being out there, you know what it looks like. What the Jefferson County, the Rabbit Hole and Angels Envy and all those places, they're a front to show their product, but they are not warehousing on-site in Jefferson County. They're moving all of that storage out into the country to where it lets the particulates get out in the air and doesn't create a problem with the neighboring community. So I have some concern. Industrial park, microbrewery, fine. Warehouse it somewhere else. But there's a lot of little things here. It's a big topic, and I, like a couple others, we went to the meetings and we discussed it, trying to make sure we do the right things if we do anything at all. But that part concerns me if we go with it. In other words, what do we do if we go with it?
Manager Greenwell.
Thank you, Judge. I don't want to throw cold water on the tourism industry in Oldham County. It's a vital part of our community, and we must keep up the efforts to improving that. That being said, just like Magistrate Tice just got through saying, if we pass this and we don't get a distillery and all we get are the barrel warehouses out of the deal, well then, as far as I'm concerned, nobody that I know of drives anywhere to see a warehouse full of bourbon. They go to the distillery
You're exactly right.
to see the process, and if there's a warehouse there on the facility, on site, well then they go see that too because it's there. But nobody in their right mind would drive out in the country to see a barrel warehouse, nor pay for that.
But the thing you have to think about too is bourbon is a hazardous material to move. And so the shorter the distance they can move it from the distillery to the barrel warehouse, the better. That's why, you see more barrel warehouses concentrated around the distilleries and not far away because of the cost of moving it as a hazardous material in a tanker car or in the barrels. A lot of the warehouses that are being built now around Jim Beam Claremont are because of moving the product out of the distillery into the barrel warehouses. I struggle with, and I understand exactly what you're saying, I struggle with us getting just a barrel warehouse. I don't know how we avoid that per se, but I also don't know how economically practical that is to have happen. It may not be a correct term, but you understand what I'm saying. Why would you have a distillery far away from your barrel warehouse, too far away, and just put it out in Oldham County just because? They do it all the time. Well, I don't know if they do it all the time. You don't have them, they're not that far away from the distilleries. We don't have a distillery that close to Oldham County today that's going to produce that amount of bourbon. It's going to need that big of a warehouse.
Manager Dye.
There could be a happy median here. We could, the example that Ms. Alley put on the screen, that was for the maximum size warehouses that you normally see, those big behemoth ones we've seen in the news recently that fall down, burn up, such. Maybe in what Magistrate Hound said, that we don't have a lot of acreage out there that's going to support these big behemoth warehouses. Maybe if we said, okay, you can do your brew pub and all of that, whatever it's all in here, the craft distillers. So, okay, you can have a barrel warehouse, but it's going to be a miniature. It's going to be a smaller warehouse where they can still, because the whole point of the whiskey warehouse is to store the whiskey for many years before they take it back out of the barrel. So I understand why they do what they do, but maybe that's a happy median here. In other words, no, not yet. But I think maybe that's what we could be thinking about is we could amend this. I don't know exactly how you all want to do the verbiage, but maybe we could amend this and work on that and work on that concept. In other words, I'd rather have 4 or 5 tourism points with little warehouses than no warehouses, or no tourism points and a bunch of, as Manager Greenwell says, a bunch of big behemoths. So I think there's a happy median here if we could just agree on it.
Okay,
I have a question.
let's, Manager
I just have to disagree with Bob. If you're going to have a warehouse, you might as well have a warehouse. If you're not going to have a warehouse, don't have a warehouse. The mold is still there no matter whether you have a big one or a little one. So I don't understand your premise. So.
All right, let's just let magistrates take a breather here for a second. Is there anybody here who would like to speak in favor of the AG2 Business Agricultural Business District as proposed? And the barrel warehouse in the thing, including barrel warehouses.
Including or not, or not.
Well, it was proposed, AG2 with barrel warehouse. I mean, we've got the whole 9 yards in here right now.
Yeah, the real discussion is about distilleries, micro distilleries,
Right,
breweries.
but that's part.
But I think David had.
Judge?
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon. My name is David Bazanis. I'm with the Oldham Chamber and Economic Development Office. And really happy about this topic coming in front of fiscal court, and want to commend the SRC and Jim Urban and Amy Alvey for all the hard work that their office has done putting this together. I think the big picture of this topic, and I wish the cameras were still here for this, is to show that our county is being proactive in trying to accommodate the type of businesses that we would like here, while also being conscious of the importance of our quality of life. So that being said, I am in great support of the Ag 2 business district classification. I do have some issues with some of the specifics, namely the setback conversation. And by the way, just for a point of clarification, the mold that these distilleries and barrel warehouses produce is not mold, it's a fungus. So it's important to show that because there's no adverse health consequences as a result of this. And not living near a distillery, I have this fungus on my gutters outside my house. So it's just something for consideration. We certainly want to make sure that we're aware of the impact we have on our neighbors in the residential areas and whatnot. I'm an advocate for allowing for the Ag 2 business with the conditional use permit for both the distilling and the barrel warehousing and the craft brewing in this new classification. I think we're taking a step in the right direction, but we're stopping a little bit short. We currently have where we can have both of these products in an industrial zoning, and if you look at our industrial zoning all across the county, we are near other buildings, other properties, other commercial businesses, other residences, whether you're on Commerce Parkway or whether you're out in Buckner. You can build a distillery and or a warehouse, or if you look in Crestwood, where our current distillery has gone through a multi-million-dollar expansion, which doesn't just include barrel warehousing, but also includes production. Jefferson Reserve is a draw, and the impact that not only that it has on tourism and pulling people into our county and our community, but also the impact it has on the surrounding businesses. So, you know, this doesn't exist in a vacuum, and while the effort here is to try to create a place for these types of products and industries, we have to be careful that we're considering that we're still in a market with other counties who are accepting of these types of things. So the importance of this decision is related to making us more flexible so that we don't just have to have the option for an I-zoning, but could also go towards this model that we see happening all across the state, which is distilleries who are no longer just production facilities. They're actually tourism and amenities to communities. So we have dealt with multiple distillery projects, some of whom have included as part of their concept parks, walking trails, restaurants, all kinds of amenities like that. So we need to make sure that we're clear about what we're talking about and we're comparing apples to apples when we go through with a decision like this. So, but I applaud the effort and I'm glad that this is something we're taking on as a topic.
So anybody else here would like to, did you want to ask a question?
Whenever I get my turn, I would like to.
Also like to speak in favor of this? Right.
No, excuse me. No, I wasn't thinking.
Thank you, Judge. And I'd like to start. My name's Greg King. I'm Vice Chair of the Planning Commission and Study and Review Committee, and I would like to start by thanking all of the magistrates who came and spent countless hours improving the discussion and the outcome of these recommendations that came before you today. So what I'd like for you to know is that we looked at this and we have a concern about what this county can offer, but there's also this concern. If you guys haven't seen them, there are recommendations or there are expressions of interest in locating these types of facilities right now. What I'd like to arm our tourism leadership with is an opportunity to go to those people and say, here are the rules we play by in Oldham County. This is the way we do things. We don't have that. What's going to happen if we don't do this? They're not going to go away. They're going to come in here and they're going to request waivers, variances, conditions of approval, contingencies, right? That's on one. Get a second one, do the same thing, do it a third time, right? Some of these are going to come forward and you're not going to want to say no. You're going to want to locate a facility like this in Oldham County. After we get a couple of them in here, now we've got a different set of rules for all of them. And we still haven't armed our tourism people with a reason to go to them and say, here's the way we do business in Oldham County. We know what we're doing. We want to do it this way. We'd like for you to be right here in our midst. So those are some of the more important things that we're looking at. If we take a look at the barrel warehouse, I agree that we're not going to get a distillery operation without a barrel warehouse. And I don't know how to resolve that issue either. But I will point out this opportunity cost that comes with a barrel warehouse. The density of development on a barrel warehouse is a whole heck of a lot less strain on your schools, your roads, and other needs in this county, other infrastructure, than any neighborhood. There are places for these things. They're not for everywhere. These are enormous setbacks, by the way. We had discussion earlier that says, hey, as we move these things out into the country, we don't have issues with the mold. I don't think we can make any blanket statements, but with the enormity of these setbacks, we think we have mitigated that risk quite a bit in these recommendations. I'd like for you to think about that. I'd like for you to think about a common set of rules for people to come into this county and play by. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Judge, members of the court, just going to follow up with what Greg had to say. We have struggled with this on the SRC and in the Planning Commission for quite some time. And this is issues that are, as he's pointed out and David has pointed out, are very important to Oldham County. And so I would just like, you all to at least consider it. I know the warehouses seem to be the sticking point, but as they pointed out, if we don't get the warehouses, or at least the opportunity to bring warehouses into Oldham County, I think we're going to be very limited on what distilleries we can, capture and bring into the community. So, I hope you all will look at this, and I think has been pointed out, some of these could come into the industrially zoned areas, and I don't know that we would have as much control. We will have to prove them one at a time, things like that, or have to look at them, one at a time and bring them forward. So, I hope you all will at least consider this process that we're going through, and we have spent a lot of man hours, a lot of time with the staff, Amy and Jim, and our zoning staff has really gone to bat for us here to get this information put together and to present to you all. And I hope you all will make a decision today that will benefit Oldham County, as we move forward. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Kevin.
Oh, sorry. Kevin Jeffries, Chairman of the Planning Commission. Thanks.
Right. I was going to identify you, Kevin. Right. Kevin used a politically incorrect word there. He said man hours. We have people hours now.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. We don't mind. We're not politically correct here anyway, Anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of this ordinance or this adoption?
Scott Black, 3616 Echo Valley Circle. Just want to make sure when you all get ready to vote on this that to separate out the breweries, microbreweries, and don't group them in with the barrel warehouses. Totally different ball game. So I'd hate to see that go under if the distilleries or the barrel warehouses went under. So,
all right.
Look out.
Nice to see you, Scott. I haven't seen you for a while.
You're doing a good job.
Good. Glad to have you here. All right. Is there anybody who'd like to speak in opposition to the proposed change? Seeing no one, I'll close the public comment then and go back to the court. So now, anybody here who would like to speak further on this issue before or make any amendments to the suggested provision?
I would like to propose, if we can do it, to accept everything from planning and zoning that we've heard today, except for the AG2. Come back next week. We've already spent a couple hours on all the other issues. If we can go on and pass and move them through. Don't want to push it off 3 or 4 months. I don't think that's fair to the planning and zoning and all the time they've put in. But it'll give all the magistrates that have heard new things that they can formulate in their mind and drill down on this by itself for an hour or two and add or subtract or find out, do legislative work. Make it work to where everybody's reasonably, Kevin Elger said, happy or unhappy, and then we get this thing finalized at our next court hearing where we don't have a lot of stuff still on our docket.
I don't know if you could, would you
Well,
have to read?
we have a motion and the second on the floor. I guess, are you proposing an amendment to the motion?
Sir,
Are you proposing an amendment to the motion?
you know more about that than I do. Tell me what I
I
am
think
proposing.
Propose to table?
if
Do
you
you have a
propose, you'd have to ask the sponsor of the, I don't think we can just arbitrarily jump out and vote for something different. We have,
I'd like to hear the motion repeated, because I don't think it pertains to, the motion was for the AG1 zoning, right?
no.
You proposed another, you did
Well,
another?
can I recommend something? Let's
First
take
of
a
all,
bite
let
of
me
this.
ask the clerk, do we have a motion on the floor?
Yes,
We have a motion on the floor to adopt the AG2 Agricultural Business District.
no, the motion on the floor.
No, that was withdrawn.
The motion on the floor is to accept and adopt section 250, 300, 320 regarding distilleries, breweries, and barrel warehouses. That's the motion made by Brent Lankins and seconded by Chris Hounds.
And it only,
Corrected.
Judge,
and
can
it
I
only relates to that and not the other work that we've done?
We've already passed all the other ones.
Okay,
So
then
all
my
we're- all we're
recommendation
down
is to table this.
All we're down to
I'll
is,
second that, Wayne.
you can't do
Can I
that.
recommend
I have
something,
lighting to
Judge?
do.
Just a moment, just a moment. Jim?
Well, what I recommend is consider rescinding that motion and second, and then let's take a bite of the apple at a time. As an example, I think I heard that brew pubs was not really an issue, and so you can consider just the brew pub part. And then you can have discussions about like the industrial and yea or nay, and then the Ag 2 and distilleries. But at least then, I think we can get past, and again, I'm assuming that everybody seemed okay with the brew pub portion, so you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So maybe, again, consider rescinding the motion and second, and starting with a new motion to take one bite of this thing at a time.
Judge, this is a
I
public
disagree
hearing. We
with
can't,
what, I believe the
table
motion, when I ask for a motion on this, I didn't break out the classifications within the motion. I asked for a motion to accept this AG2 Agricultural Business District. I believe Magistrate Lykin said yes, and somebody else said no. I did not break these out separately.
Sir,
What we, in essence, did, we started at the back and moved forward. And so what his motion should have been was about the barrel warehouses, because that's what we talked about. If we didn't get past that, there wasn't any sense in doing the rest of it.
we did the AG2 zoning consideration first. And Magistrate Likens made a motion to approve that, and I seconded it. Then the question came up, do we need to have an AG2 zoning when we don't have the other part of it? So Brent withdrew his motion, I withdrew my second, and we went into the next session. And I don't recall, was there a motion and second on that?
There's a motion and a
Yes.
second on this
Okay.
piece right here.
So we have not taken any action on the AG2 zoning.
No. All, the motion that on the table that I seconded was this document right here talking about distilleries, barrel warehouses, which includes the distilleries, barrel warehouses, the brew pubs, and that. This is the motion that's on the floor to approve this documentation.
Agree with my interpretation, right?
And then AG2, I think as Magistrate Harris said, that's going to be brought up next if this happens. If this doesn't happen, there's no point in having AG2.
Right.
Right.
That's how I understand
Okay,
it.
well, right.
So right now, the motion that Magistrate Likens and I have on the table is to approve distilleries and barrel warehouses, the document that's in front of us. Is that correct?
Right, that's what I'm trying to say. But that's what the entire thing is. And then we were gonna go back and put AG2 into the other one, into the agritourism section. But this whole thing is AG2.
Well, not really.
How come Wayne can't make a motion to table it? Since,
Because it's out of order right
Yeah,
now.
I think I'm out of order on that.
oh, okay.
Judge,
Didn't intend to.
I don't think we can table anything because this is a public hearing. It would have to be re-advertised.
Right.
We table
Carter's
part
shaking
of
his
it.
head yes.
I think the only thing, you've passed all of it except this last section. And the last section is a standalone section. The only thing I think you can do is if you don't pass the last section, it'll have to be proposed as an amendment, have to go through the amendment process to add it to the ordinance and give notice and have a first reading and a second reading if you don't approve it.
All right, let's stand up and make a decision here and not push this off into the, nothing's going to change. Yeah, the votes I don't think are going to change a bit.
We got one
Myself,
walked
I
out.
mean, we'll be going around and around the circle on this. Magistrate Hawkins?
May I still comment?
Yes?
Is this still, okay. This one was a hard call for me because, as my constituents have stated, as we move into the future, we would like development that doesn't congest our roads. If possible, in barrel warehouses certainly would limit congestion on our roads. However, a single barrel warehouse or even a couple barrel warehouses wouldn't bring any employment generating or any increased tourism or any increased visibility in a positive light to Oldham County as it stands on its own. And as it's written, there's no protection for the county. Somebody could buy 32 acres and store the least desirable part of the operation inside a 60-foot tall warehouse in the middle of an ag field. And I'm not against some of the other things listed in as far as ag businesses, because I think those would be an improvement. But I do think that as it's written, with the barrel warehouses, there's no guarantee that anything else would come alongside it to boost tourism or increase the positive visibility in Oldham County. So I can't vote to allow a 60-foot building in the middle of an ag field. So with the barrel warehouses in here, I would vote against it. With the barrel warehouses out of it, or if it's written to where a barrel warehouse could be in place with other tourism or economic development or other positive aspects, rather than just the least desirable part of the operation in it, I would be able to vote for that. But as it stands, there's no guarantee that there would be anything positive to come with that if we were to vote to just have barrel warehouses as it stands, as it's written.
So you could support having barrel warehouses as long as they are part of a on-site distillery operation?
I would support that. I would support that because it would be a boost to the economy. It would be positive. For example, like Kim Buckler spoke about, who's our tourism person, at SRC meetings, she spoke about having those who own a barrel warehouse a sort of clause to where they would bring a restaurant, a tasting room, a shop to go shopping, bring that with it instead of just having one, barrel warehouse that's 60 feet in the air in the middle of an ag, where currently we only have 60 feet in C2, C3, C4, and then now we would approve it in the middle of an ag. So that's what I'm saying.
Mr. Hounds.
We're not going to see these barrel warehouses. There's not the land.
No guarantee.
Yes, there is guarantee, because they're not going to build a barrel warehouse on a hill. I travel Oldham County on a regular basis. The amount of flat land that's in Oldham County, people, is not as great as you think it is. And you can't build a barrel warehouse unless you've got a complete flat place to put it. They're not going to come in and excavate a whole area to put a barrel warehouse. I understand what you're saying. It's the economic development is minimal on a barrel warehouse. But, and I'm not a distillery, I don't own any access in a distillery, but my point is, I really struggle with someone that's just gonna build a barrel warehouse out in the middle of a field somewhere, and that's all they're gonna do.
But
It
they do
doesn't
that.
make any economic sense.
They do that in Indiana and in Henry County.
But that's not what we're trying to promote here. We're not trying to promote just barrel warehouses. But if you have a distillery, they're gonna want a barrel warehouse for the experience. If you go to any one of the distilleries, and I've been to many of them, you do go through the warehouses. You can go down to Maker's Mark, I can tell you right now, they've got a whole tour that runs you through the barrel warehouses.
But
on
Chris,
purpose.
that's a combined distillery and barrel
is.
warehouse.
Yes.
It is.
I mean, I went through that same warehouse, but I didn't go there because of the warehouse. I went there
Agreed.
because of the distillery and see them to dip those bottles in wax.
But I think maybe, a compromise that I was thinking about the whole time, is there a way that we can work this out that we don't have just standalone barrel warehouses? Is that the rub?
That's the rub for
Yeah,
me.
because
Can't you
if
limit
we
the
pass
distillery?
this,
What's that?
Can't we say you have to have a distillery? A distillery can have barrel warehouses, but no barrel
Then let's
warehouses
add,
without a
I would be
distillery.
okay with adding that to the clause. I understand the rub with just having a barrel warehouse. I get that. But let's add to the equation, if you have a barrel warehouse, you've got to do some kind of distillery in the process.
yes. Yes.
Do you have to have a second?
Well, he's called for the question, so the vote would be to end debate, not vote on the motion. All right? And then if that is defeated, we'll go back and keep talking about this. Ask clerk to call the roll.
Magistrate Tice,
Oh, this is the question, you're voting yes to stop debate, no to continue talking.
Magistrate Tice,
I'm going to vote no to stop the debate, but I'd like to have a 10-minute recess. Go ahead.
Magistrate Greenwell,
Yes.
Magistrate Hounds,
No.
Magistrate Logsdon,
Yes.
Magistrate Hawkins,
No.
Magistrate Likens,
Yes.
Magistrate Harrison,
Yes.
Magistrate Dye,
Yes.
Judge Vogel,
No. All right, motion, all right, 5-4, where you stop the debate. Now we will vote on barrel warehouses and distilleries being permitted in Oldham County with all the other, with the craft breweries and everything else that was in here, brew pubs, and that's,
Judge,
yes, ma'am.
a no vote meant that we were voting no to the question, meaning we will keep discussing it, right?
Yes.
So we'll keep discussing it.
No, we lost 5-4. Discussion was 5 to stop discussing it.
Right before
4,
we voted, you said, if this is defeated, we'll continue talking about it.
But it wasn't. It passed.
Motion.
The no vote meant to stop discussion.
No vote meant to continue.
No vote meant to keep on.
The no vote
vote
meant to
continue.
continue discussing it. 4 people voted to continue discussing it, 5 voted to stop discussing it.
I don't think
So-
any of the 5 made a mistake, Magistrate. I think the 5 that voted yes knew what they were voting.
That's why I tried to clarify that before the vote, so you knew what you were voting for. I said, if you voted no, that means you were opposed to Mr. Logston's request to stop talking about this.
Okay, and so I voted no to continue talking
Yes.
about it.
Yes,
So they were 5 yeses and 4 nos?
yes,
Okay,
right.
thank you.
I know that gets a little bit confusing. That's why we have to do that. So now at this point, the question is, will we include in the ordinance revisions distilleries and barrel warehouses? And approve AG2? Correct?
No.
I think that's what the question here is.
Not approve AG2. Not approve AG2.
How can you approve these and not approve AG2? Because they make up the entire thing.
You go back and approve AG2 after we have
To that
this.
subject next. We agreed that we were going to set aside the AG2 and discuss this piece. If it was adopted, then you would go back to the AG2 and consider adopting it.
Correct.
Yes.
If
but,
it's not
this-
accepted, we won't go back to.
This is the entire AG2 thing.
No.
No.
Not-
If it's not
separate-
accepted, we don't go back.
All right.
Because you have
just part of
industrial,
AG2.
you have industrial
All right.
and the AG. Yes.
So, I know we have a motion on the floor, okay? Can we change, if we just so choose, to add restrictions to this that says, if you have a barrel warehouse.
I don't think so, because I think we
That's a call
voted to
for the
stop.
question.
We did.
We're done.
I think we're going to vote on the motion that's on the
Vote on the
floor.
motion
Okay.
that's on the floor.
Yes.
Judge, may I for a second? Mr. Carter, if we had, can we amend that motion or add restrictions here on this? Would it be considered a substantive change?
No.
Okay.
It has to be, if there's a substantive change, you have to re-advertise it.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to vote now whether or not that we're going to allow distilleries and barrel warehouses and micro brew pubs in Oldham County.
May I ask Mr. Carter a question, or no?
Okay,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Mr. Carter,
Okay.
could we, if this doesn't pass, could we come back with it after advertising it and after amending it? You're saying after we advertise?
If you make a substantive change to a proposed ordinance that's been advertised, you have to re-advertise the ordinance as amended and go through the process.
Thank you.
Judge, can I ask Mr. Carter a question?
Okay.
Just, if they didn't pass this, can the rest of it move on and retract this one piece? Would that be
Yes.
it? Yeah, so if you don't approve this today, the rest of what you've already approved could move forward.
It's because it's not amended.
That's correct.
You just passed it and it did not pass this part of it.
Correct.
All right, so a vote yes means that you are willing to have a distillery and barrel warehouses in Oldham County under appropriate circumstances and as approved by the Planning Commission. No one just shows up and does it. They have to be approved by the Planning Commission. Ask the clerk to call the roll.
Magistrate Tice?
He gets in the box twice in a row.
Oh, he wants to go to the restroom.
It's yes or no, Wayne?
You can come back to it.
You want it or not?
I want to support it, but I have a few issues that I thought if we tabled a couple of weeks, that we could work through.
Yes or no?
Well, we can't, though. It's parliamentary,
I got it.
parliamentarily inappropriate.
Magistrate Tice, yes or no, please?
No.
Magistrate Greenwell?
No?
Magistrate Hawkins?
No?
Magistrate Logston? Magistrate Likens?
Yes.
Magistrate Harrison?
Yes.
Magistrate Hounds?
Yes.
Magistrate Dye?
Yes.
Judge Vogel?
All right, this is where the county judge earns his money. And I'm going to say that I think we have enough safeguards in here. I think we have some places in the county that this could fit. It won't fit everywhere, but it could fit some places. I'll vote yes.
One last one.
Well, so the next piece is to consider the AG2 now, which is just, again, it's creating the AG2 zoning classification and permitted uses. Let's see.
I got it, Jim.
Got it. This is what you're considering. There's only 2 pages. This page, which has permitted and conditional uses, and adds the distillery, craft distillery, brewery, microbrewery, barrel warehouses, and farm implement repair. And these are the standards, the minimum lot size of 5 acres. And this is, if you were gonna do other uses, the setbacks, and then in the distilleries, craft breweries, what you just approved was the setbacks of 500 feet, et cetera. So it's just these 2 sheets.
All right, Judge, I'd like to make a motion to approve the Division 25 AG2 Agricultural Business District as represented here as page 1 and 2.
Second. Second.
All right. Any further discussion?
Question. If this goes down, then the other is not effective, right?
I would have to ask the county attorney that.
It'd be mute. It'd be moot.
If we don't pass the AG2, then what we just voted on is null and void, correct? That's
Well, except like the barrel warehouses and the things that are in the I-2 and I-1 zoning
Oh, they're good.
classification. Well,
You're right.
They're already permitted in
but
industrial.
we've changed some of the standards. So you have in what you just adopted, there are I-1 and I-2 standards that you probably don't really want to go away, because they are permitted already again.
Or we can bring it forward again.
Or you could bring it forward again, because they are already permitted in the
Correct.
I-1 and I-2 zoning classification.
We just have to change the setbacks.
That's correct.
Okay.
Judge, I guess it boils down to you better remember how you voted the last time.
Judge?
Magistrate Harrison.
To me, having surveyed just about every corner of this county, you can divide the county into two areas, row crops and dairy cows. The southern part of the county is dairy cows, you don't have flat land. The northern part of the county, row crops, you do have flat land. Magistrate Hounds made a comment yesterday, he could only think of 3 places where you might be able to put one of these warehouses. I can think of 15 at a minimum. I've got clients on property I've surveyed over in the Goshen Skylight area along 42. They don't want to see development. They don't want to see residential development. Who knows what they would do if somebody came to them with a proposal, will you let me put up a barn? We're taking that right away from property owners by sitting here arbitrarily deciding what's good and what's not good. I think the Planning Commission has already gone through this exercise. They've gone through it repeatedly. And if you look at a spreadsheet I put in front of everybody before the meeting, I tabulated the length of service that every member on that commission has, and it totals 120 years. And you take the top 7, and it totals 89 years, with Kevin Jeffries being at the top with 22 years and 8 months. That's a lifetime of knowledge and experience dealing with issues that we see only briefly and infrequently. And I will defer to the judgment and experience of the Planning Commission and say this should be approved. I think maybe it's not good for the county. I don't know, maybe nobody will come in. But if somebody does come in and goes to David Bazanis and says, I want to build a warehouse, can I do it? The barrel warehouse? Right now, where? At least if we pass this, we give other people an opportunity to sell their property, not for development. The warehouse doesn't need sewers. It may need water. It doesn't need fiber optic or any of these other things. So I think we're being short-sighted and not representing the future interest of this county if we do not accept this and approve it. Thank you.
All right, do we have a motion on the floor to include this AG 25 classification? I don't know what the proper wording is. AG 2 within the revision of the comprehensive zoning ordinance.
Yes, inclusion in the zoning ordinance. Mhm.
All right. I guess we'll ask Sheila to call the roll one more time.
Magistrate Hounds?
Yes.
Magistrate Dye?
Yes.
Magistrate Harrison?
Yes.
Magistrate Likens?
Yes.
Magistrate Tice? No. Magistrate Greenwell?
No?
Magistrate Hawkins?
No.
Magistrate Dye?
You already called.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Magistrate
Twice.
Logston? Magistrate Logston?
No.
No.
Back to the judge.
Judge Vogel?
Yes.
There you go.
Motion carries 5-4.
Judge, I don't know if we're going to take a break or get on to anything else, but we need to award the bids for the paving. We're ready to do that.
Are we ready to do it?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, we have one more section of this
Oh.
lighting that we need to do
I'm
when
sorry.
we come back
I'm
from our
sorry.
break,
Lighting.
and then we'll be done.
I
And
apologize.
just make a motion to approve the lighting and second, and we'll go on.
Well, I think we had a request earlier for a 10-minute break.
Too late now, Judge.
Make a motion, we accept 310, the lighting regulation ordinance.
Second.
Any discussion on it? Pardon?
First, there's discussion.
Huh?
I said, of course there's discussion.
Well, if there's going to be discussion, I think we need to take the break, okay? Because I
Rescind
planned
your
on, when people request a break, there's generally could be a reason in there, so don't want to hold up. So, all in favor of taking a 10-minute break till 5:30? Say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
I'm not sure what we did, but I guess it's okay.